Mom, I'm really sorry, but I've been thinking lately that I might have to drop out of college. I just can't afford it anymore. What do you mean? Shouldn't you be able to get by with $3,000 a month? Isn't what I send you enough? Wait, Mom, you've never sent me anything, have you? Her words hit me like a punch. I was sure I'd been receiving money from her every month. There's only one explanation for this. Anger started to boil up within me. The person I decided to confront was my own mother. My name is Beatrix. I lost my husband early, and I've been raising my daughter, Anita, all by myself. Our life together has always been a stretch. I never had the time or money to worry about my appearance. Did I look so miserable? Occasionally, my mother-in-law would look at me with disdain. Beatrix, can't you at least try to improve yourself a little? Your hair, your clothes, you look, well, a bit shabby. I'm sorry, I'll try to do better. It hurt to be criticized, but she was right. I had no choice but to accept her words. I've never let myself get angry or snap back at her. In the spring of a certain year, my daughter, Anita, was accepted to her dream college. It was a far commute from home, so she decided to live on her own. Anita, I'll do my best to send you money, so you have to do your best to study. Don't push yourself too hard. Remember, your health comes first. Mom, that's my line. I'll work part-time too. Don't worry about sending me money. Her thoughtful words filled my heart. Anita had grown up to be such a kind child. Even though our life had been tough compared to her friends and other families, I wanted to support Anita and make her college life as fulfilling as possible. I didn't want her to have to worry about money, so I worked harder than ever before. $3,000 a month, that was my goal. If I could send her that much, she wouldn't have to work a part-time job. My mother-in-law noticed my efforts and spoke to me. So, you're sending money to Anita. Can you really afford it? I hope that doesn't mean less for us. You know we rely on your support. I had always been grateful to my father-in-law when he was alive, and after his death, I continued to support my in-laws out of gratitude. Don't worry, I've taken on more jobs, so I'll still be able to give you your share. Oh, I see. That's fine then. After losing my husband, my income was unstable, and I guess my mother-in-law was worried. I understood her concern, so I never thought about reducing my contribution to my in-laws. Supporting my in-laws and sending money to Anita, it was more than $3,000 in total. Still, I managed to send it all, even if it meant cutting back on my own food and clothing expenses. Working all day and night was tough, but the messages from Anita always encouraged me. Mom, I've made friends. Mom, there's this weird professor, but the class is so interesting. Mom, I didn't do well in class today and got scolded, but I'll keep trying. Reading such innocent messages from Anita, I could sense she was enjoying her college life. Any exhaustion? I felt utterly blown away, a mix of pride and concern swirling within me. I had poured my heart and soul into working hard for Anita's happiness. But as time passed, her messages became sparse until they stopped altogether. A few months later, the cheerful updates ceased entirely. Whenever I reached out in worry, her responses were curt, "I'm okay." Could it be that college life had consumed her, causing her to forget about her mother? Or perhaps she had found a boyfriend and was solely focused on him. One day, lost in such thoughts, my phone rang suddenly. It was Anita. "Hello, Anita. What's up?" It was unusual for her to call. We typically converse face-to-face at home. Even after she moved to college, most of our communication was through text. "Yeah, I'm sorry, Mom. What happened?" Anita sounded down. I could sense something was amiss, so I concentrated on her voice through my smartphone. I ran out of money. I'm thinking maybe I should quit college." Anita's words hit me like a ton of bricks. "What do you mean you're out of money?" "I'm sorry, I tried my best," she said, her voice trembling on the verge of tears. I had faithfully sent her $3,000 every month without fail. It wasn't a lavish amount, but it should have been enough to prevent her from struggling to the point of contemplating dropping out. Besides, she was supposed to be working part-time as well. I couldn't fathom how she could be in such dire straits. Could she have fallen in with the wrong crowd, neglecting her studies to squander her money? I entertained the thought for a moment before shaking it off. No, that's not like Anita. "Anita, it's okay. Take a deep breath and tell me what happened." "Yeah, I was trying to make ends meet with rent, groceries, and my part-time job earnings. I had to dip into my savings, and now that's all gone too. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm really sorry." "Hold on a second. What about the money? I send you every month." That should cover your rent and living expenses, right? No. No matter how I calculated it, the numbers didn't add up. If Anita was spending her salary, my remittances, and even dipping into her savings, something was seriously wrong. But she didn't seem to be lying. Anita, you never sent me any money, did you? Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. That's impossible. I've been sending you $3,000 every month. Did you check properly? Are you sure there's no money in your account? There's nothing. I've been keeping a close eye on my banking. If you'd sent me that much money, I definitely would have noticed. The shock hit me like a punch to the head, leaving me feeling dizzy. It was clear Anita hadn't been receiving the money, and it was causing her a lot of trouble. You don't need to drop out of college. I'll send the money right away, so don't worry. Do you have something to eat today? Are you okay? You're not getting sick, are you? I'm fine. I switched to a job where I get meals, and my friends have been worried about me. They've been sharing some food with me. That's great. You have good friends. We need to thank them next time. But Anita, you're already having a hard time. I don't want you to struggle anymore because of me. So that's why you didn't tell me until the situation got this critical. Thank you. But listen, for me, seeing you in such a difficult situation is much worse. So please leave the rest to me. With that, Anita finally let out her emotions and started crying. I wondered when was the last time I heard her cry like this. After comforting Anita and hanging up the phone, I immediately took action, driven by a growing anger. I decided to confront my mother-in-law, who lived nearby. Oh my, what's the matter, Beatrix? Showing up without a call? How rude. Never mind that. What have you been doing with the money I've been giving you each month? What money? Of course, that money is for living expenses, she replied, her face momentarily twitching when I mentioned the money for Anita. I'm talking about the money for Anita. I was giving that to you too, right? The remittance to Anita was not directly transferred by me into her account. I've been handing it directly to my mother-in-law, who lives nearby, and she offered to make the transfer herself when she learned it was for Anita. So, I have been giving her an additional $3,000 for Anita's remittance. I would have declined if it was only about transferring the money, but there was a reason I didn't. That's because she said, I want to contribute to my granddaughter too. That's what you said, right? I trusted you and gave you the money. But what do you mean you didn't transfer it? My mother-in-law had convinced me with that, even though she was getting money from me. I thought it was her kindness toward Anita and trusted her. What are you talking about? I've been transferring money to Anita's account every month. Yes, I have. Please stop lying so blatantly. Anita has told me that she never received any transfers. Oh my, for her to lie like that. What kind of child is she, Beatrix? Maybe it's your parenting that's the problem. Excuse me? Hearing my own daughter being called a liar made me feel a rush of blood to my head. But if I lost my temper and forgot myself here, it would play right into her hands. I told myself to calm down, took a deep breath, and spoke again. Anita doesn't lie. If you insist on this, show me the bank statements where you made the transfers. I threw those away a long time ago. Listen, by checking Anita's account history, it's easy to see whether you really transferred the money or not. Even after knowing this, are you still going to call Anita a liar? Anyone could think of this, but when I said it, my mother-in-law seemed at a loss for words. She huffed again, muttering stubbornly under her breath. So persistent. I took a deep breath and continued, if you insist that you transferred the money, we should let the police investigate. The police? Isn't that a bit dramatic? It's not. This is about money. You said you transferred it, but it didn't show up. That sounds like a crime to me. We need to get it properly investigated. I don't think we need to go that far. Well, then I'll contact them now. No, stop. As I pretended to call the police, she lunged to snatch the phone from my hands. She missed and stumbled, then fell down and started crying. I never expected the mere mention of the police to have such an effect. In reality, I wasn't sure if the police would do anything in a situation like this where it was obvious that a family member was involved. But the word police itself seemed to weigh heavily on her. Despite her sobbing, I felt nothing. Anita, who had tried so hard not to cry, was the one who had suffered. According to her subsequent confession, she had always loved shopping. She probably had a shopping addiction, although she didn't seem to realize it. She tearfully told me about how her husband had once cut up her credit cards and how difficult it was for her. As far as I could tell, it was entirely her own doing, but she didn't seem to understand that. I suspected something was off. My mother-in-law kept getting the same amount of money even after he passed away, but I started getting requests for money earlier than expected. That never happened when he was around because he never gave me any money. When I went grocery shopping, he would check all the receipts, and I had to return every cent of the change. Can you believe that? It was awful. I felt so pitiful. I couldn't begin to understand what she thought was pitiful and didn't bother trying. In other words, when her husband was alive, he managed the household finances and kept her from having any extra money. When he was gone, I finally had some money. I started buying things I couldn't afford before, and, well, I fell a little short. Then you mentioned sending money to Anita, so you took Anita's money. Do you realize that's theft? Theft? That sounds so awful. I was just borrowing it with no intention of returning it. Anita suffered because of your selfishness. She's young, she can handle it. Caught off guard by her incomprehensible retort, I was at a loss for words. I've been deprived for so long. I couldn't buy anything I wanted, couldn't even go out to eat or travel. I had such a hard life. Young people can work and play as much as they want, so why shouldn't I take some money? I stood there speechless, staring at my mother-in-law as she cried and screamed, and all I could think was that I had trusted this person. My father-in-law had done me many favors, but now that I think about it, I can't recall my mother-in-law ever being kind to me. However, when Anita was still a little girl, my mother-in-law did buy her various things, so I thought she was expressing affection for Anita in her own way. And I was relieved. Looking back, I suspect all that shopping was just to satisfy her own desires. I failed to see that, and I caused Anita unnecessary suffering. Such a gentle child, I can never regret it enough. Mother-in-law, no, Evelyn. I intentionally called her by her first name. I don't want to think of her as my mother, even if it's just in-law. I cannot forgive you. After that, I sought free legal advice and did everything I could to recover the money, but you can't take from a person who has nothing. However, I had a trump card. Before my father-in-law passed away, he left me a will giving me the rights to his property. At that time, I wondered why he left it to me, but now I can guess that he might have been worried about his wife's reckless behavior. Naturally, my mother-in-law demanded that I renounce the inheritance, but I firmly refused. I want to praise my past self for staying firm despite being severely criticized as a greedy daughter-in-law. No matter what they say, I felt that I couldn't disregard my father-in-law's feelings. I didn't know the reason or the circumstances, but maybe I felt something. So technically, the house and the land are mine and my mother-in-law is just living there rent-free. I decided to sell the house. That meant the parasitic mother-in-law living there was in the way. So I contacted my mother-in-law's parents. This contact information was secretly given to me by my father-in-law, just in case. I really admire his foresight. That's why it's such a shame he didn't have a good eye for women. I knew that my mother-in-law had always hated her own family, but the reason became clear when I contacted them. They were a traditional farming family with strong tendencies toward male chauvinism. A stranger like me called, and they listened with a suspicious attitude, but they gladly agreed to take in my mother-in-law. It seemed like they wanted free labor. The conversation progressed quickly, and one day, out of the blue, her family came to pick her up, an event that my mother-in-law couldn't have predicted. I'll never forget the color draining from her face. When I took her brother, who came to pick her up, to her house, now my mother-in-law is doing tough farm work under strict supervision. She can't even go shopping at the supermarket, let alone squander money, and she seems to be living the life without touching money at all. Due to the stress, she seems to have aged quickly and is working every day as a wrinkled, frail, ghost-like figure with white hair. Looking at the recent bank statement of the money I just transferred to Anita, I smiled, thinking that if I saw her at night, I might scream. The house sold easily. It wasn't in a particularly good location, but once I decided I was okay with selling it for a low price, a buyer came forward immediately. The amount was enough to recoup the money wasted by my mother-in-law. I used that money without hesitation for my living expenses, and I sent Anita the money I earned from working. It's all money, but somehow the money I got from selling the house feels tainted, and I didn't like that. I've transferred this month's money just now. With that thought, I quickly texted Anita. Even if I hadn't transferred the money, as long as I had communicated that I had sent it to Anita, she wouldn't have discovered the mistake so late. I regret now for neglecting such simple communication due to my busy schedule. The reply came swiftly. Got it? The message full of Anita's usual energy, accompanied by a string of cute emojis. She checked so quickly, but these days it seems you can easily check your bank balance on your mobile phone. I don't understand it at all, so I can only admire the adaptability of the young. Since then, Anita started sending messages frequently again. With the money reliably reaching her, her life must have become stable. It's clear from her texts that she's energetically continuing college without quitting. While I was feeling pleased, another message arrived from Anita. Looking at it, my eyes widened and I broke into a grin. Mom, there's someone I want you to meet. I didn't expect this day to come. It was all worth it. I can't sit around. I need to prepare something good. I changed my plan and headed to a high-end supermarket I don't usually go to. Since I no longer have to send money to my mother-in-law, there's a bit more wiggle room in my life. I've even been able to quit a few of the jobs I was juggling. I wonder what kind of food my daughter's partner likes. With a bit of premature speculation, I laughed. In the near future, I plan to invite the fresh-faced couple to our home and treat them with the best hospitality I can muster.
The soft hum of the air conditioning in my office was a stark contrast to the storm of thoughts swirling in my mind. I'm Anna, a 28-year-old lawyer. My life now is a far cry from the turmoil of my childhood, a past I kept locked away, even from those closest to me. The serenity of my office was shattered by the ringing of my phone. The display showed an unknown number, yet something about it felt ominously familiar. With a hesitant hand, I answered. Anna speaking, I said, my voice a blend of professionalism and caution. Anna, it's your father, came the voice, laced with a nervousness that did nothing to calm my rising apprehension. A chill ran through me. It had been over a decade since I last heard that voice, a voice that once meant safety and love but had become a symbol of betrayal and pain. Why are you calling me? I asked, my words sharp, cutting through the silence that followed his introduction. I'm in trouble, Anna. Financially. I need your help, he said, his voice cracking slightly. His plea, however sincere it might have been, ignited a fire of resentment within me. My help? Now you need me after all these years? I retorted, disbelief and anger intermingling in my tone. Yes, I wouldn't ask if it weren't serious. I'm really in a bind, he continued, desperation creeping into his voice. You stopped being my father a long time ago. You can't just call me now and expect me to help, I responded, my voice cold and unwavering. There was a pause on the line, a heavy silence that felt like an unbridgeable chasm. Anna, please. I'm still your dad, he said, a feeble attempt at rekindling a bond long extinguished. The word dad felt foreign, almost jarring. A dad? You forfeited that title when you chose her over me, I said, the years of suppressed anger and hurt finding their way into my words. You're my daughter. I thought. You thought wrong, I interrupted, cutting him off mid-sentence. You made your choice years ago, and now I've made mine. His voice was a mix of pleading and despair. Anna, I am sorry. I just need this one favor. The word sorry echoed in my office, a hollow and meaningless sound. Sorry doesn't change the past. I can't help you, I stated firmly and hung up. My childhood, before the age of 10, was filled with love and laughter, a testament to the wonderful life my parents and I shared in our small rented house. My mother, a beacon of joy and kindness, filled our days with warmth and our nights with stories and dreams. My father, once a playful and caring man, would spend evenings playing games with me or teaching me little things about the world. Our home was a cocoon of happiness, where every day was an adventure and every night a sweet dream. But our blissful life came to an abrupt halt with my mother's untimely death. The house that once echoed with laughter and love turned into a silent mausoleum of memories. I remember walking through the rooms, each corner a stark reminder of her absence. The loss was unbearable, not just for me but for my father too, who had lost the love of his life. However, the depth of his grief seemed to diminish quickly, much to my confusion and dismay. Within just a few months, he brought home Marissa, a woman who was to take a significant role in our lives. I recall the day he introduced her, a day that marked the end of my cherished childhood. "Anna, this is Marissa. She's going to be staying with us," my father announced one evening, his voice devoid of the warmth I was so accustomed to. I looked up at her, searching for a hint of motherly warmth or friendliness, but found none. Her presence was imposing, her gaze cold and calculating. From the very first moment, I sensed a change in the air, a shift that filled me with an unexplainable sense of dread. "Hello, Anna," Marissa said, her voice smooth yet devoid of genuine emotion. Her smile, rather than comforting, seemed to hide something sinister beneath its surface. In the days that followed, the house felt different, as if the walls themselves were recoiling from her presence. The cheerful memories of the past seemed to fade, replaced by a lingering unease that settled in every corner. I remember looking at Marissa, trying to find something redeeming or kind about her, but her every look, every gesture, seemed to be laced with an unspoken animosity. It was clear that she wasn't here to fill the void my mother had left, but to weave a new narrative, one in which I was an unwelcome part. As I watched her move around our home, a home that once felt safe and happy, I couldn't help but feel that her arrival was the beginning of something ominous. The way she looked at me, with eyes that seemed to hide more than they revealed, did not bode well for the future. The days following Marissa's arrival were like walking through a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. The house, once filled with my mother's laughter and love, now felt cold and unwelcoming. Marissa's presence cast a shadow over everything, turning even the simplest daily routines into a series of struggles. One morning, as I sat down for breakfast, I noticed my food tasted unusually salty. "Marissa, did you put too much salt in this?" I asked, my voice hesitant. "Oh, did I? It must have been a mistake." "Just eat it, Anna. Don't be so picky," she replied, her tone dismissive, almost mocking. The incidents grew more frequent and spiteful. I remember finding my clothes ruined after laundry. "Marissa, my clothes are all faded." "What happened?" I asked one day, holding up my once favorite dress, now discolored and unwearable. She glanced at it and shrugged nonchalantly. "Maybe the washing machine is acting up. Or perhaps it's time you stop wearing such childish clothes." I felt a surge of frustration but knew arguing would only make things worse. Feeling helpless, I turned to my father, hoping he would see through her facade. "Dad, Marissa is ruining my things. She's always mean to me," I said one evening, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and sadness. My father's reaction was far from what I had hoped for. "Anna, you're imagining things. Marissa is doing her best to fit into our family. Stop causing trouble," he said sternly, his words cutting deep. "But Dad, it's the truth." I protested, but he wouldn't listen. "That's enough, Anna. I don't want to hear any more of your accusations," he replied, his voice rising in anger. Each day was a battle, trying to navigate around Marissa's hostility and my father's indifference. The home that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a prison. I started spending more time in my room, trying to escape the constant tension that hung in the air. Living in that house of horrors, I felt alone and misunderstood. The safety and happiness that once filled those walls were replaced by fear and anxiety. Every day, I longed for the past, for the times when my mother's smile was enough to light up the entire room, a stark contrast to the darkness that now lingered in every corner. Living with Marissa became a daily ordeal of evasion and endurance. Her hostility towards me escalated from verbal jabs to physical abuse. It started subtly, a pinch on my arm or a twist on my stomach, always in places easily concealed under my clothes. The pain was sharp, a cruel reminder of my helplessness in her presence. I developed strategies to avoid her, constantly alert to her whereabouts in the house. I would take long routes to my room or wait until she was occupied before I moved around. Despite my efforts, there were times when she caught me off guard, and those moments always resulted in some form of pain. One day, while I was quietly reading in the living room, Marissa walked in and, for no apparent reason, pinched my arm hard, her nails digging into my skin. I winced in pain but bit back any cry of protest. She looked at me with a cold, triumphant smirk before walking away. During one of Grandma's rare visits, she noticed my cautious movements and the way I flinched when Marissa's voice echoed through the house. "Anna, is everything all right at home?" Grandma asked, her voice filled with concern. I looked at her, my heart aching to tell her the truth, but fear and the desire to protect her from worry held me back. "Yes, Grandma, everything's fine. Just a lot of schoolwork," I lied, offering her a forced smile. She seemed unsure but didn't press further. I felt a twinge of guilt for deceiving her, but I couldn't bear the thought of causing her any distress. That evening, as Grandma left, I saw Marissa watching from the window, her expression one of satisfaction. It was as if she relished the fact that she had control over me, that she could hurt me and get away with it. Her triumphant look was a clear message that she was the one in power, and I was just a helpless player in her twisted game. I retreated to my room, feeling trapped in a cycle of abuse and silence. The physical pain from Marissa's pinches and twists was bearable compared to the emotional turmoil I felt. School was my sanctuary, a place where I could briefly escape the misery of my home life. But even there, the shadows of my struggles at home began to seep through. My teacher, Mrs. Thompson, a kind-hearted woman who always encouraged her students, started to notice changes in me. One day, as I was handing in my homework, she gently grabbed my wrist, her eyes drawn to the bruises on my arm. "Anna, what happened here?" "These look like bruises," she said, her voice laced with concern. I quickly pulled my arm back, covering the bruises with my sleeve. "It's nothing, Mrs. Thompson. I fell while playing," I lied, avoiding her gaze. Mrs. Thompson didn't look convinced. "Anna, if there is something wrong, or if someone is hurting you, you can tell me. It's important to speak out," she urged, her eyes searching mine for the truth. I wanted to confide in her, to tell her everything about Marissa and how I lived in constant fear, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I forced a smile. "Really, Mrs. Thompson, I'm fine. It was just a silly accident." She gave me a long, thoughtful look, then nodded slowly. "All right, Anna. But remember, my door is always open. You're not alone," she said, giving me a reassuring smile. I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. Her kindness made it all the more difficult to maintain the facade that everything was all right. As I walked home that day, Mrs. Thompson's words echoed in my mind. I felt a mix of gratitude for her concern and a deep sense of loneliness from carrying my burdens alone. The thought of revealing the truth about my life at home was terrifying. I feared the consequences, what Marissa might do if she found out I had told someone. That night at dinner, I was quiet, lost in thought about Mrs. Thompson's offer to help. Marissa noticed my silence. "Why so quiet tonight, Anna? Cat got your tongue?" she asked in a mocking tone. I just shook my head and continued eating, trying to make myself as small and unnoticeable as possible. After dinner, as I lay in bed, the reality of my situation felt more overwhelming than ever. Mrs. Thompson's concern had shown me that people did care, yet the fear of what revealing the truth might bring kept me silent. I was caught between the desperation to tell someone and the fear of Marissa's retaliation, a balancing act that I navigated every day. The day my teacher, Mrs. Thompson, decided to involve my father was a day filled with anxiety and dread for me. I sat in the principal's office, fidgeting nervously, my mind racing with fear about how my father would react. When he finally arrived, his face was stern, his eyes betraying a mix of irritation and embarrassment. "What's this about, Anna? Why am I being called to your school like this?" he demanded, his voice sharp as he walked in. I glanced at Mrs. Thompson, seeking a semblance of support. Swallowing hard, I tried to find my voice. "Dad, Mrs. Thompson she saw the bruises," I stammered, feeling the weight of his gaze on me. Before I could explain further, he interrupted, his anger palpable. "Bruises? What are you talking about? Are you making up stories again?" Mrs. Thompson stepped in, her tone firm yet calm. "Mr. Smith, I'm concerned about Anna's well-being. The bruises on her arm don't seem accidental. We need to address this." My father's face turned a shade darker with anger. She's perfectly safe at home. Anna, are you spreading lies about our family? He turned towards me, his disappointment clear. The tears I had been holding back started to spill. It's not lies, Dad. Marissa, she's been hurting me. I managed to get out, the truth finally surfacing. His reaction was one of total disbelief. Marissa? That's ridiculous. She's been nothing but kind to you. I won't have you slandering her with these accusations. But Dad, it's the truth. I cried out, desperate for him to believe me. He stood up abruptly, his patience wearing thin. Enough of this. Tell Mrs. Thompson you made it all up. I obediently turned to the teacher and repeated his words. She nodded back and didn't say anything. Upon reaching home, without another word, he locked me in my room. Through the door, I could hear Marissa's voice, dripping with false concern. I told you she's just seeking attention, she said. I sat on my bed, feeling a profound sense of isolation and despair. The one person I thought I could always count on had turned his back on me. The walls of my room, which had once felt like my personal haven, now felt like the walls of a prison. I lay there, thinking about everything that had happened. The pain of the physical abuse was nothing compared to the emotional torment of being disbelieved and punished by my own father. It was a harsh realization that the person who was supposed to protect and love me unconditionally was now the source of my deepest pain. The days following my confinement in my room were some of the darkest I had ever experienced. Trapped and feeling utterly alone, I realized that my only hope lay in my grandmother, my father's mother. She was a kind and loving woman who had always shown me affection, but I had never dared to burden her with my troubles at home. One evening, when I was sure Marissa and my father were occupied, I mustered the courage to call my grandmother. My hands were shaking as I dialed her number. Hello, her familiar, warm voice came through the phone. Grandma, it's me, Anna, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Anna, my dear, how are you? She asked, her tone filled with genuine care. Tears welled up in my eyes as I replied, Grandma, I need help. Can I come and stay with you for a while? There was a moment of silence on the other end. What's wrong, Anna? Did something happen? I took a deep breath, the words rushing out. It's Marissa, she's been hurting me, and Dad won't believe me. I don't know what to do. I could hear the concern in her voice as she quickly responded, Of course, my dear. You come right over. I'll take care of this. The next day, my grandmother arrived. She was a small woman, but her presence filled the room. She confronted my father with a strength that surprised me. John, I'm taking Anna with me. She's not safe here, she declared firmly. My father, taken aback, tried to protest. Mom, you can't just take her. She's my daughter. Your daughter whom you failed to protect, she countered sharply. I won't stand by and watch her suffer. Marissa tried to intervene. She's just a child making up stories. You can't believe her over us. Grandma turned to Marissa, her eyes steely. I know a scared child when I see one. Anna is coming with me, and if you try to stop me, I'll take this matter to the authorities. My father, realizing he was defeated, didn't put up any further resistance. As I gathered my things, I saw Marissa's expression change from defiant to defeated. Leaving the house with my grandmother, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I felt safe. The car ride to Grandma's was quiet, but her presence was comforting. Once we arrived, she turned to me and said, You're safe now, Anna. You don't have to worry anymore. In my grandmother's house, I found the love and security that had been missing in my life. It was a haven where I could heal and regain my strength. The contrast between her nurturing home and the coldness of my father's house was stark. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe again, free from the fear and anxiety that had plagued me. Years had passed since I left my father's house to live with my grandmother. Her home had been a sanctuary, a place of healing and love. But time, as it does, moved on, and with it brought another wave of change. My beloved grandmother passed away, leaving a void that seemed impossible to fill. At the funeral, my father and Marissa showed up, their faces a mix of feigned sorrow and poorly disguised eagerness. It was clear they were more interested in what they might gain from her passing than mourning her loss. After the funeral, as we gathered at my grandmother's house, Marissa wasted no time. "Well, Anna, I suppose you'll be finding a new place to live now. This house and everything in it belongs to your father now," she said, her voice tinged with a barely concealed glee. My father nodded in agreement, his eyes scanning the room as if already planning what to do with the house. I couldn't help but smile, a reaction that seemed to confuse them. "Actually, that's where you're wrong," I said, the confidence in my voice taking them by surprise. "What do you mean?" my father asked, his expression shifting to one of confusion. I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. "Grandma left a will. She bequeathed the house and a substantial amount of money to me," I explained, watching as their expressions changed from confusion to shock. But you're just a child. I'm your father. I should be in charge of any inheritance you receive," my father stammered, his sense of entitlement clear. Marissa chimed in, her voice shrill. "Yes, until you come of age, your father will manage your property." Good prospects. Their reactions were almost amusing. "You don't give a damn about me so much that you didn't even wish me a happy birthday. I turned 18 a month ago. I'm legally an adult now. I make my own decisions," I stated firmly, relishing the look of realization dawning on their faces. My father's expression turned from shock to anger, then to a sort of desperate pleading. "Anna, you can't do this. We're your family." I looked at them, memories of my childhood flooding back. "You stopped being my family a long time ago," I said, my voice steady. Marissa stepped forward, her tone now begging, "At least let us stay in the house. We have nowhere else to go. We have not extended the lease of our house." I shook my head. "This is my house now. You'll need to find somewhere else." As they left, the weight of years of pain and neglect seemed to lift off my shoulders. I stood in the house that was now mine, a house filled with memories of my grandmother's love, and felt a sense of closure. The echoes of the past my father's call stirred remained. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling a tumult of emotions. Anger, betrayal, and a sense of injustice. But amid all that, there was also a sense of strength, a reminder of the resilience that had carried me through the darkest of times. I've always found solace in the quiet aisles of bookstores, the kind where time seems to have its own rhythm and stories leap from tattered pages. At 29, running a business that my parents helped me set up, I often escaped to these havens, seeking the company of books over people. That day at Dusty Pages, a little haven tucked away in the city's heart, was no different. Or so I thought. As I wandered through the maze of shelves, my fingers traced the spines of countless books, each holding a universe within. My quest was specific, a rare, antique edition that had eluded me for months. And there it was, almost glowing amidst the dust and shadows. As I reached out, another hand mirrored mine, halting inches from the prize. Startled, I looked up into a pair of curious eyes. The owner of the hand was a man about my age, with a kind of easygoing charm. "Oh, I'm sorry," he said, quickly retracting his hand. "Were you going for this one?" "Yeah, I've been on its trail for ages," I replied, surprised at my own honesty. He gave a half-smile, "Me too. It's a tough find. But go ahead, you found it first." His gesture, so simple yet rare, caught me off guard. "Are you sure?" "I mean, we both found it at the same time," I said, feeling a strange mix of guilt and gratitude. "Yeah, I'm sure. I'm Jake, by the way," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "Nice to meet you, Jake." "I am, well, let's just say I'm a fellow book lover," I said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, friendly. We both chuckled, and I took the book, feeling a twinge of victory mixed with sympathy. "You're a rare breed, Jake. Giving up a find like this." He shrugged. "Books come and go. But it's not every day you get to make someone's day." I laughed. "Well, you've certainly made mine. I'm in this place often, but I haven't seen you around." "You a regular?" "Nah. First time here. I usually stick to the tech world, but there's something about old books, you know?" I nodded, understanding all too well. We found a corner table amidst the stacks and started talking about books, life, and everything in between. He was easy to talk to, a listener with stories of his own. He was curious about my business, but I dodged the topic, not ready to delve into the whole successful businesswoman with family support narrative just yet. Hours slipped by like minutes as we talked. I learned about his tech job, his love for hiking, and his surprisingly good taste in old movies. In turn, I shared my love for antique books, my random adventures, and my guilty pleasure of bad reality TV shows. As the bookstore began to dim its lights, signaling closing time, we exchanged numbers. "It was really great meeting you, Jake. Maybe we can do this again, talk more about books, or anything else," I said, feeling a connection I hadn't anticipated. "Absolutely," he replied, his smile genuine. "I'll hold you to that. And maybe next time, I'll find the book first." After several months of dating Jake, the inevitable happened, meeting his family. He'd warned me about them, how they were a bit, well, let's just say they had their quirks. He was especially worried about them finding out about my business and the money situation. So, I decided to play it down, saying I was a freelancer. Just a simple girl writing articles, nothing fancy. We drove to his parents' house one Sunday. It was a modest home, the kind that had seen better days. The moment we walked in, I felt the weight of their eyes sizing me up. "Mom, Dad, this is..." Jake started. "I'm Sarah," I cut in, offering a smile that felt more like a shield. His mom, a stern-looking woman with a permanent frown, gave me a once-over. "Sarah, huh? And what is it you do?" "I'm a freelance writer. I write articles for websites," I replied, trying to sound as humble as possible. His dad, a quiet man with a knack for disappearing into the background, just nodded. But it was Jake's sister, Linda, who spoke next. "A freelancer? So, like, you don't have a real job?" Linda's voice dripped with a mix of curiosity and disdain. I felt Jake's hand tighten around mine, a silent plea for patience. "Well, it pays the bills." "It's honest work," I said, keeping my tone light. Linda snorted. "Sounds more like freeloading to me. Bet you're just waiting to latch onto Jake's income." Dinner was an awkward affair. His parents made small talk, asking Jake about his work, barely acknowledging my presence. Linda, on the other hand, was like a dog with a bone, dropping snide remarks every chance she got. "So, Sarah, freelancing must be tough. Bet you don't get to go on fancy trips or buy nice things," Linda said, her eyes sharp. I forced a laugh. "Oh, you know, I manage. I like simple things." Jake tried to change the subject, talking about a recent project he was working on. But Linda wouldn't let up. "And what about kids? Planning on any? Or would that be too much for a freelancer to handle?" she pressed on. I could feel Jake's frustration growing, mirroring my own. "We haven't really thought that far ahead," he said, his voice tight. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of uncomfortable exchanges and forced smiles. Things started heating up after that awkward dinner with Jake's family. It wasn't long before his mom and sister, Linda, began dropping by our place uninvited. They'd come in, plop themselves on the couch, and make themselves right at home, often staying for hours. It was like they were marking their territory, reminding me that I was the outsider. One such afternoon, while Jake was at work, his mom and Linda showed up. As usual, they made a beeline for the kitchen, expecting to be fed. I had just made some sandwiches for myself, which they took as an invitation to lunch. So, Sarah, still freelancing? Linda asked, taking a bite of the sandwich I had made for myself. I nodded, trying to keep my cool. Yep, still at it. It's going well. And how much does that bring in, if you don't mind me asking? His mom chimed in, her eyes scanning my modest living room like she was calculating my worth. I shrugged, enough to get by. I don't really discuss my finances. Linda smirked, must be nice, living off Jake while pretending to work. I clenched my jaw, feeling my patience wearing thin. Actually, I pay my own bills. Jake and I keep our finances separate. Their prying continued, but I dodged their questions, keeping my answers vague. They seemed to take pleasure in trying to undermine me, questioning my lifestyle, my job, even my relationship with Jake. Then came the family dinner at Jake's mom's place. It was supposed to be a casual get-together, but it felt more like a trial by fire. We all sat around the dining table, the air thick with unspoken tensions. Linda, who had been oddly quiet, suddenly turned to Jake. So, brother, I was thinking, for my son's birthday, you could get him that gaming console he's been wanting. It's a bit pricey, but you can afford it, right? Jake, who had been picking at his food, looked up, surprised. Linda, you know I can't do that. Things are tight right now, what with the wedding and all. Linda's face turned sour. Oh, so now that you're married, you suddenly can't spare a dime for your nephew? Jake's frustration was evident. It's not about that, Linda. Sarah and I have our own expenses. I can't just splurge on expensive gifts. The argument escalated, with Linda accusing me of monopolizing Jake's finances and attention. You've changed, Jake. Ever since she came into your life, you've been stingy and distant. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, the unspoken blame hanging heavy in the air. Jake tried to defend me, but Linda wouldn't have it. She stormed out, leaving a trail of tension behind. After the blow-up at the family dinner, Jake and I decided we needed a break from all the drama. We planned a short trip to the mountains, a chance to clear our heads and get some breathing room. It was a peaceful, rejuvenating escape, just the two of us and nature. But the moment we returned, reality crashed back in, harder than ever. We barely had time to unpack when there was a furious knocking at our door. I opened it to find Linda, red-faced and fuming. We need to talk, she said, pushing past me into the apartment. What's going on, Linda? Why are you here? I asked, closing the door. She whirled around, eyes blazing. Don't play dumb, Sarah. I know what you're doing. You're bleeding Jake dry, using his money to go on fancy trips and buy expensive stuff. And now you're turning him against his own family. I was taken aback by her accusation. Linda, that's not true. We both pay for our expenses, and this trip was planned long ago. She wasn't listening, though. You think you're so clever, huh? Making him think he doesn't need us, that we're just after his money. But I see right through you. Jake came out of the bedroom, having heard the commotion. Linda, what the hell? You can't just barge in here and start accusing Sarah of nonsense. She rounded on him. Nonsense? Look at you, Jake. Ever since she came into your life, you've been different. You used to help us, be there for us. Now you're just her puppet. Jake's patience was wearing thin. Linda, I'm not anyone's puppet. Sarah and I make our decisions together. And as for helping you, I can't keep bailing you out every time you have a financial problem. Linda's anger seemed to boil over. In a fit of rage, she swept her arm across the coffee table, sending my collection of antique books crashing to the floor. This is what you care about now? Old, useless books and a gold digger? I gasped, rushing to salvage my books. Jake grabbed Linda's arm, steering her towards the door. That's enough, Linda. Leave. Now. She struggled against him. You'll regret this, Jake. choosing her over your own family. After she left, the apartment was eerily silent, the tension hanging thick in the air. Jake helped me pick up the books, his face a mix of anger and regret. The weeks following Linda's outburst were quiet, almost nearly so. Jake and I had started to relax a bit, thinking maybe, just maybe, his family had decided to back off. That was until we got the call from his mom about her birthday dinner at a fancy restaurant downtown. When Jake mentioned that his mother's birthday dinner would be at Le Jardin, I couldn't help but grin. I had a special connection with that place, a little secret that I hadn't shared with anyone, not even Jake. As we drove to the restaurant, I could sense Jake's anxiety. He fidgeted in his seat, clearly worried about how the evening would unfold after the recent tensions with his family. "You okay?" I asked, reaching over to give his hand a reassuring squeeze. "Yeah, just hoping tonight goes smoothly," he replied, forcing a smile. Le Jardin was as elegant as ever, with its dim lighting and soft music creating an intimate ambience. Jake's family was already there, seated at a large, round table. The scene was lively, with animated conversations and laughter, but it all seemed to pause as we approached. I quickly noticed there was only one empty chair. Jake, with a hint of confusion in his voice, addressed his sister, Linda. "Hey, Linda, why is there only one seat? We're both here." Linda, with a smirk that didn't quite reach her eyes, said, "Oh, Jake, we assumed Sarah wouldn't mind. After all, this is a family gathering, and she's not really family, is she? Maybe she can find a spot at the bar." The table erupted in a mix of awkward chuckles and murmurs. Jake's face turned a shade of red, a mixture of embarrassment and anger. I felt their eyes on me, expecting me to react, to show some sign of hurt or outrage. But instead, I laughed, a genuine, hearty laugh. "That's quite all right, Linda. I wouldn't want to impose." Jake, still holding my hand, looked at me with a puzzled expression. "Sarah, you sure you're okay with this?" I squeezed his hand. "Absolutely. Don't worry about me. I'll find a place. Enjoy the dinner." As I stepped away from the table, I could feel their eyes on me, a mix of surprise and uncertainty in their gaze. I approached the restaurant manager, a familiar face, with a confident stride. "Hi, John, seems there's a bit of a mix-up at our table. Could you find a spot for me?" I asked, my tone light but firm. John's professional demeanor broke into a smile of recognition. "Of course, Sarah. For the owner of Le Jardin, we always have the best table available." The words were loud enough for Jake's family to hear, and I glanced back to see their expressions shift from smug satisfaction to utter shock. Linda's and her mother's mouths hung open, their plan to belittle me backfiring spectacularly. As John led me to a beautifully set table in a prime location, I couldn't help but savor the moment. The irony of the situation was delicious, and their stunned faces were a sight to behold. Sitting at my own VIP table at Le Jardin, I couldn't help but feel a mix of triumph and amusement. Jake sat across from me, his expression still a mix of shock and pride. "Sarah, why didn't you tell me you own this place?" he asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. I shrugged, sipping my wine. I guess I never found the right moment. And, honestly, I wanted to keep some parts of my life just for me, at least for a little while. He laughed, shaking his head. "This is incredible. No wonder you weren't fazed by Linda's comment." Our meal was delightful, the food exquisite as always, but the real entertainment was the drama unfolding at the family table. Midway through our dinner, Linda and Jake's mom, with hesitant steps and awkward expressions, approached our table. "Sarah, we didn't know," Jake's mom stammered, clearly struggling to find the right words. "Yeah, about the restaurant, and you owning it," Linda added, her usual confidence deflated. I put down my fork, giving them a calm look. "It's okay. Not many people do. I prefer to keep my business affairs private." Jake's mom fidgeted, glancing at the other table where the rest of the family was pretending not to eavesdrop. I mean, about the bill tonight. We assumed you'd. I raised an eyebrow. You assumed I'd pay because I own the place. They both nodded, visibly uncomfortable. I could tell they were expecting me to bail them out of the awkward situation they had created for themselves. I leaned back in my chair, choosing my words carefully. Well, as much as I'd love to treat everyone, I think it's important for us to stick to what was planned. It seems, someone said that I'm not a family member, right? The look on their faces was a mix of surprise and embarrassment. Linda, usually so quick to speak, was at a loss for words. They returned to their table, their departure marked by a few curious glances from the other guests. Turning back to our meal, Jake let out a low whistle. Well, that was something. I laughed, the tension from earlier completely diffused. Just a typical dinner with your family, huh? He nodded, his eyes still on his family's table. You know, I'm starting to think these dinners are cursed. We finished our meal in peace, the atmosphere at our table starkly contrasting with the palpable tension at the family table. As we left the restaurant, I felt a sense of closure, like I had finally established my place in this complicated family dynamic. Their attempts to belittle me had backfired, and in revealing a part of my life I had kept private, I had gained an unexpected upper hand. The ride home from Blue Jardin was filled with a mix of silence and soft music playing in the background. Jake seemed deep in thought, occasionally glancing at me as if he was about to say something but then deciding against it. Finally, as we pulled into our driveway, he spoke up. Sarah, I'm really sorry about tonight. My family, they can be too much. I turned off the car's engine and looked at him. Jake, it's not your fault. But we do need to talk about this. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Yeah, I know. What do you think we should do? I took a moment before answering. I think it's time we set some boundaries. Your family's behavior has been out of line, and tonight was it was too much. Jake nodded, his expression grave. I agree. I just never expected things to get this bad. Linda and Mom, they've always been difficult, but this. It's not just about Linda and your mom, I interjected. It's about respecting our relationship, our choices. They can't keep treating me, like this. Jake reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. You're right. I'll talk to them. It's time they understand that they can't walk all over us. The following day, Jake made the call. I could hear bits and pieces of the conversation from the other room, his tone was firm, resolute. After he hung up, he came into the living room, looking somewhat relieved but also apprehensive. I did it. I told them we need space, that their behavior is unacceptable. They didn't take it well, but I think it's for the best. I got up and gave him a hug. Thank you, Jake. I know that wasn't easy. He hugged me back, tight. You're worth it. I should have done this a long time ago. The weeks that followed were surprisingly peaceful. No unexpected visits, no snide remarks, no drama. It was a relief, but also a bit surreal. One evening, as we were enjoying a quiet dinner at home, Jake looked up from his plate. You know, I've been thinking. Maybe this break from my family is a good thing. Gives us time to focus on us, on what we want. I smiled, reaching across the table to hold his hand. I've been thinking the same thing. It's nice, isn't it? Just being us, without all the noise. He nodded, a contented smile spreading across his face. Yeah, it really is. Cutting ties with Jake's family wasn't an easy decision, but it brought a sense of clarity and peace to our lives. It was a step towards prioritizing our happiness and well-being, a step that was long overdue. Sitting on our living room couch, Jake and I were enjoying a quiet evening. The room was filled with the soft glow of the lamp and the faint sound of a jazz record playing in the background. I couldn't help but reflect on the roller coaster of events that had unfolded in our lives recently. Jake, I started, breaking the comfortable silence. Do you ever think about how things would have been if we had just, I don't know, given in to your family's demands? He looked over at me, his eyes thoughtful. Sometimes. Yeah. But then I remember how unhappy we were, constantly trying to please them. I think we made the right choice. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. It's just crazy, you know? How much we've been through because of all this. Makes me wonder what's really important in life. Jake reached out and took my hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. What's important is this, us, being honest with each other, standing up for what we believe in. I smiled, feeling a sense of warmth spreading through me. You're right. I guess it's all about finding a balance, isn't it? Between dealing with family and staying true to ourselves. Yeah, balance, he echoed, his gaze shifting to the window. You know, before all this, I always thought family was about sticking together no matter what. But now, I realize it's more than that. It's about respect, understanding, and sometimes, distance. I leaned my head on his shoulder. I never expected my life to turn out like this. Meeting you, starting a business, dealing with all the family drama. It's been a journey. And what a journey it's been, he added with a chuckle. With its ups and downs, but I wouldn't change a thing. We sat there in silence for a while, lost in our thoughts. The challenges we had faced with his family had tested us in ways we never anticipated. But through it all, we had grown stronger, both as individuals and as a couple. That evening, as we sat together, I realized that life is unpredictable and often challenging. But with the right person by your side, it's an adventure worth every moment. Our story wasn't just about dealing with difficult in-laws or running a successful business. It was about love, resilience, and the power of standing together against the odds. I always thought my life was pretty normal, just like anyone else's. My name is Sarah, and I've spent the last 17 years married to Mike. We've got 3 boys, Jake, the oldest at 15, always buried in his books, Sam, the middle one, 13, a soccer fanatic, and little Max, 10, the comedian of the family. Our life seemed like a typical family's. I was a housewife, happy to be one, while Mike worked as the director of his family's company. We were doing all right, especially since I had some income from investments I made with the money my grandma left me. It wasn't much, but it helped. Things started changing slowly. It was subtle at first, but then it became too obvious to ignore. Mike, who used to be affectionate and caring, began acting differently. His warm smiles turned cold, and his gentle words became harsh. It was a regular Thursday evening. The kids were upstairs, and I was setting up the dinner table when Mike walked in. He looked tired, or maybe just annoyed. I couldn't tell anymore. Hey, Mike. How was work today? I asked, trying to keep the conversation light. He shrugged, barely looking at me. Same as always, Sarah. Exhausting and endless. I handed him a plate of his favorite pasta, hoping to cheer him up. Well, maybe this will help. He poked around the food with his fork, not eating. Then, out of nowhere, he said, Sarah, have you looked at yourself lately? You've really let yourself go. His words hit me like a punch. What do you mean? I asked, my voice trembling a bit. You know what I mean. You used to take care of yourself, look good. Now, it's like you don't even try. I felt my face burning. I'm taking care of our home, our kids. I don't always have time for myself. He scoffed. That's just an excuse, Sarah. You could make the time if you wanted to. I was stunned. Mike never used to be like this. He was the one who always told me I was beautiful, no matter what. I'm not some model, Mike. I'm your wife, the mother of your children. And that's exactly why you should try harder. Look at you. How am I supposed to take you to any company events looking like this? His words stung. I felt small, insignificant. I didn't realize my looks were so important to you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. They are, Sarah. They are. And right now, you're just not cutting it. I stood there, feeling a mix of anger, hurt, and confusion. This wasn't the man I married. This was someone else, someone I didn't recognize. The rest of the evening passed in silence. I cleaned up the dishes, trying to process what just happened. Mike went to the living room, probably to avoid any more conversation. It wasn't just a one-off comment from Mike. The criticisms kept coming, each one sharper than the last. It felt like I was living with a stranger. He'd always been so supportive, but now, it was like he was looking for things to pick on. One evening, we were sitting in the living room. The boys were out at friends' houses, and it was just the two of us, which had become increasingly rare. I thought maybe we could have a nice chat, like we used to. So, Mike, Jake's been talking about colleges already. Can you believe it? Our boy is growing up, I said, trying to start a light conversation. Mike, however, seemed disinterested. He muttered, not looking up from his phone. I sighed, feeling the familiar sting of being ignored. You know, I was thinking we could do something as a family this weekend. Maybe go for a picnic, like old times. He finally looked up, but his expression was far from warm. Sarah, why do you always avoid talking about the real issues? I was taken aback. What issues, Mike? You, Sarah, you and how you've just given up on yourself. There it was again, that harsh tone that had become all too familiar. Mike, I haven't given up on myself. I'm just busy with the boys, the house. He cut me off. No, that's not an excuse. Look at you. You wear the same old clothes, your hair's always a mess. It's embarrassing. I felt a lump in my throat. Embarrassing? Is that what you think of me? Yes, it is. I mean, when was the last time you even tried to look nice for me? For us. I tried to remember the last time I had dressed up. It had been a while, but did it really matter that much? Mike, I'm your wife, not a doll to dress up. I have responsibilities. And part of those responsibilities is to be presentable, Sarah. Not just roam around like you don't care. I stood up, feeling my anger rising. I do care, Mike. I care about our family. But if you're so concerned about appearances, maybe you should look at yourself too. When was the last time you did something for us, for the family? He stood up too, his face red. That's different, Sarah. I work all day to provide for this family. And I work all day at home to keep this family running. But you wouldn't understand that, would you? There was a tense silence. Then, Mike spoke, his voice cold. Maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I need someone who understands me better. Those words felt like a slap. Is that what you want, Mike? Someone else? He didn't answer. Instead, he just walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, feeling more alone than ever. Despite the heavy air between us, I decided to make a change. Not for Mike, but for myself. I joined a local fitness club, thinking maybe a bit of exercise would help clear my mind. It was a sunny Tuesday morning when I told Mike about it. We were in the kitchen, he was getting ready for work, and I was fixing breakfast. Mike, I joined a fitness club, I said, a bit nervously. He raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued for the first time in weeks. Really? That's unexpected. Yeah, I figured it was time to do something for myself. He chuckled, but it wasn't a warm sound. Well, let's see how long that lasts. I bit my lip, holding back a sharp retort. I'm serious about it, Mike. He shrugged, finishing his coffee. We'll see, Sarah. We'll see. That conversation stayed with me as I headed to the fitness club. Determined to prove him wrong, I threw myself into the workouts. I started jogging in the park every morning, feeling a sense of accomplishment with each stride. One morning, a couple of weeks into my new routine, I was jogging in the park. The air was crisp, and I was pushing myself harder than usual. I wanted to get home before Mike left for work, to show him I was sticking to it. I was so focused on my pace that I didn't see the uneven patch of ground. My foot caught, and I stumbled, falling hard on the path. Pain shot through my leg, and I knew immediately something was wrong. Limping back home, it was a mix of pain and frustration. This was the last thing I needed. Mike was still home when I got back. He looked surprised to see me limping. "What happened to you?" he asked, more curious than concerned. "I fell while jogging," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the pain. He snorted. "Jogging? More like tumbling, it seems." I winced, both from the pain and his words. "It's not funny, Mike. I think I sprained my leg." He leaned against the counter, a smirk on his face. "Well, what did you expect? You can't just jump into these things at your age." I felt a surge of anger. "My age? What's that supposed to mean?" He shrugged. "It means you're not exactly young anymore. These things happen." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So, you're saying I shouldn't even try?" "I'm saying maybe you should have thought it through a bit more. Starting to work out all of a sudden, at your age, it's bound to end like this." I leaned against the wall, trying to steady myself. I was doing it for myself, Mike. To feel better. He shook his head. "Well, looks like that backfired, didn't it?" I didn't have the energy to argue. I just wanted to sit down and deal with the pain in my leg. Mike left for work, and I was left alone, feeling both physically and emotionally hurt. It seemed like no matter what I did, it just wasn't good enough for him. The days following my fall were tough. My leg was in a brace, and I felt trapped in my own home. Mike's attitude didn't help either. It was like he found joy in my misfortune. It was a Wednesday afternoon, the kids were at school, and I was sitting in the living room with my leg propped up. That's when I heard the knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hobbled to the door, curious and a bit cautious. Opening the door, I was met with a sight that knocked the wind out of me. A young woman, probably in her late 20s, stood there. She was dressed sharply, and there was a confidence in her posture that was hard to miss. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to mask my surprise. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my braced leg. "You must be Sarah. I'm Amanda. I think we need to talk about Mike." My heart sank. "Mike? What about him?" She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "I think it's time you knew. Mike and I have been seeing each other." I felt like I had been punched. "What are you talking about?" She walked past me into the living room, making herself at home. "I'm talking about Mike, your husband. We're in love, and he's going to leave you for me." I followed her, my mind racing. "That's impossible. Mike would never." She cut me off. "Oh, but he would. And he is. He's tired of this." She gestured around. "And tired of you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This is some kind of joke, right? Mike loves me. We have a family. Amanda laughed, a cold, hard sound. "Love? Please. He's bored with you. He needs someone young, someone exciting. Not a housewife who can't even take care of herself." I felt tears stinging my eyes, but I fought them back. "You don't know anything about us, about our life." "I know enough. I know that Mike wants more, and I'm more than you'll ever be." Her words were like daggers, each one cutting deeper. "You're wrong. He won't leave me. He can't." Amanda stood up, ready to leave. "Believe what you want, Sarah. But it's happening. Mike is mine now. And there's nothing you can do about it." She walked out, leaving me standing there, feeling a mix of shock, anger, and disbelief. That evening, when Mike came home, I confronted him. "Mike, we need to talk. Now." He looked surprised but nodded. "What's wrong?" "A woman came here today. Amanda. She said you're leaving me for her." Mike's face changed, and I knew. I just knew. "It's true, isn't it?" I whispered, the reality sinking in. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Yes, it's true. I didn't know how to tell you. I felt numb. How long, Mike? How long have you been lying to me? It's not about the time, Sarah. It's about us, about what we've become. I shook my head, tears finally escaping. What we've become? You mean what you've made us become? He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I'm sorry, Sarah. I never meant to hurt you. But I can't stay in this marriage. I need more. I looked at him, the man I had loved for so long, and felt nothing but emptiness. You want a divorce? He nodded. Yes, I do. It was like my entire world had crumbled in an instant. Mike, the love of my life, was leaving me for another woman. A woman who had the audacity to come to my home and tell me to my face. But in that moment, something inside me shifted. I wouldn't let this break me. I had my boys, and I had myself. Mike had made his choice, and now I had to make mine. I'll give you your divorce, Mike. But you're going to regret this. One day, you'll see what you've lost. He didn't say anything, just walked away. And I was left there, alone, but with a newfound determination. This wasn't the end for me. It was just the beginning. In the days after Mike dropped the bombshell, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Betrayal, anger, sadness, they all took turns controlling me. But amidst this chaos, a bold idea started to form. I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. One evening, as Mike and I sat awkwardly in the living room, a room that once echoed with laughter and love, I decided it was time to confront the future. Mike, we need to talk about the kids, I said, breaking the icy silence. He looked up, clearly uneasy. Yeah, I've been thinking about that too. I've made a decision, I continued, my voice steady. I'm going to move out. Mike's eyes widened. Move out? What about the boys? They're staying with you, I said firmly. He was taken aback. What? No, Sarah, you can't be serious. They need their mother. I leaned forward, my resolve unwavering. They also need their father, Mike. And you need to understand what it takes to be a parent. Full-time, not just weekends or holidays. Mike ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. Sarah, this is crazy. You can't just dump the kids on me and walk away. I'm not dumping them, Mike. I'm giving you a chance to step up. To be the father they deserve. Mike stood up, pacing the room. And what about Amanda? How am I supposed to explain this to her? I shrugged. That's your problem, Mike. You chose her. Now you have to deal with the consequences. Mike stopped pacing and looked at me, desperation in his eyes. Sarah, please. Don't do this. It's not fair to the boys. I stood up too, meeting his gaze. What's not fair is what you're doing to us. You made your bed, Mike. Now you have to lie in it. He sank into the couch, defeated. I can't believe you're doing this. I felt a pang of sympathy, but I pushed it away. This was about more than just me and Mike now. It was about our boys and their future. I'll come to see them, talk to them, but they need to stay with you, I said, my voice softer. Mike nodded, resigned. Okay, Sarah. If that's what you think is best. I knew this was going to be hard, on all of us. But it was a decision that had to be made. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking control of my life again. I talked to the children and told them about my plan. They approved it, and ever made suggestions. Perhaps I was too cruel to them and my husband, but I needed to fight back, including for the sake of my son's future. After moving out, I found myself in a small apartment, a stark contrast to the house I had called home for so many years. The space was quiet, too quiet at times, but it gave me a chance to think, to plan my next steps. It wasn't long before the first phone call came. I was sipping coffee one morning when my phone rang. It was Mike, and he sounded frazzled. "Sarah, you need to take the kids." "I can't do this," he blurted out as soon as I answered. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mike, we agreed. They're staying with you." "But Sarah, it's too much. I can't handle it. Work is hectic, and Amanda, she's not coping with them around," he explained, his voice tinged with desperation. I felt a twinge of satisfaction, but I pushed it away. "You wanted a life with her, Mike. This is part of it. The boys are your responsibility too." Mike's frustration was palpable. "They don't listen to me, Sarah. They're always asking for you. It's a mess here." "That sounds like parenting, Mike. Welcome to my world for the past 15 years, I replied, a hint of gloating in my voice. There was a pause, then Mike said, "I didn't think it would be this hard." "Well, it is. You'll have to figure it out, just like I did." We ended the call shortly after, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. Mike was finally getting a taste of the life he had always taken for granted. The next call came a few weeks later, this time from Amanda. Her voice was high-pitched and frantic. "Sarah, you have to take these kids. They're unbearable. They don't listen to anything I say." She practically screamed into the phone. I couldn't help but smirk. "They're just being kids, Amanda. What did you expect?" "They're ruining our life, Sarah. Mike is always tired, and we never have any time together. It's like living in a zoo," she complained. I leaned back in my chair, enjoying the moment. "Well, Amanda, maybe you should have thought about that before getting involved with a married man with 3 kids." Amanda huffed. "This is your fault, Sarah. You should be taking care of them, not me." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "No, Amanda. This is the life you chose. You wanted Mike, and everything that comes with him. Deal with it." The call ended with Amanda cursing, and I couldn't help but laugh. It felt good to see her squirm, to see them both realizing how much they had underestimated me and the life I had built around our family. The day I'd been dreading finally arrived, the legal meeting to hash out the divorce and custody details. I walked into the lawyer's office, my nerves taut. There was Mike, looking like a shadow of his former self, and Amanda, her face twisted in annoyance. My lawyer, Mr. Harris, gave me an encouraging nod as we sat down across from them. The mediator, a no-nonsense guy, started off with, "We're here to discuss custody arrangements first." Mike cleared his throat, looking anywhere but at me. "I want joint custody. I can't handle them full-time." I almost laughed at the absurdity. "Really, Mike? After all your big talk? Now you're backing down." Amanda piped up, her voice sharp. "Sarah, stop being such a vindictive witch. You're just trying to make our lives hell." I turned to her, my voice icy. "No, Amanda. I'm making sure my kids get what they deserve. A stable home, not a circus." Mike's lawyer, some slick young thing, tried to smooth things over. "Let's keep this civil. We're here for the kids' sake." I was about to retort when Mike blurted out, "I don't even need the damn kids. They're just a nuisance." The room went silent. Even Amanda looked at him, shocked. That's when Mike's father, who'd been silent till now, erupted. "You ungrateful brat," he bellowed at Mike. "I'm cutting you off. No more money, no more cushy job at the company. You've disgraced us." Mike's face drained of color. "Dad, you can't do that. I need that job." His father was unmoved. "You've made your bed, now lie in it." Turning to the mediator, I said firmly, "I want full alimony for the boys. They shouldn't suffer because their father's a selfish coward." Mike's lawyer started to protest, but Mike shut him down with a wave of his hand. "Fine, she gets what she wants." Amanda was silent, her earlier bravado gone. She looked from Mike to his father, realizing the gravy train had just derailed. As we wrapped up, I felt a strange mix of triumph and sadness. It wasn't a win, not really. But it was a step towards a new life for me and the boys. The dust had settled from the legal showdown, and I was starting to build a new life in a spacious apartment I had rented for me and the boys. It was different, but it felt like a fresh start. One evening, while I was unpacking some boxes, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find Mike standing there, looking miserable. "Sarah, can we talk?" he asked, his voice low. I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. "Make it quick, Mike. The boys will be home soon." He walked in, glancing around the new place. "Nice apartment," he muttered. I folded my arms. "What do you want, Mike?" He took a deep breath. I've made a mistake. I was wrong. I want to come back." I looked at him, my heart hardening. "Come back? After everything? You must be joking." He shook his head. "I'm not. I've lost everything, Sarah. My job, Amanda left me. I've got nothing." I felt a pang of something, but it wasn't enough to sway me. "You made your choices, Mike. You have to live with them." Mike's eyes filled with tears. "Please, Sarah. I'm begging you. I need my family." I sighed. "Your family needed you, but you walked away. You can't just come back because you're alone now." Mike looked defeated. "So, that's it? We're really over?" I nodded. "Yes, Mike. We're over. It's time for both of us to move on." He stood there for a moment longer, then turned and left. I watched him go, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. But mostly, I felt free. Later that night, as I tucked the boys into bed in their new rooms, Jake, the eldest, looked up at me. "Mom, are you okay?" I smiled, stroking his hair. "Yes, Jake. I'm more than okay. We're going to be just fine." He nodded. "I'm glad. I like it here. It's different, but it's good." I kissed his forehead. Different can be good. We're starting a new chapter. As I turned off the lights and left their room, I knew that this was just the beginning. A new beginning for me and my boys. We had each other, and that was all we needed. I'm Mila, a 36-year-old woman living what I thought was a fairly ordinary life. I married my college sweetheart, Jack, a man who was once my rock. We didn't have kids, just the two of us and our dreams, living in a house that was finally ours, mortgage-free. This house was a symbol of our years together, bought on a mortgage that we aggressively paid down, especially after I used the inheritance from my dad to make the final payments. Our life was simple but content, or so I believed. Jack, tall and usually unflappable with his finance job, was my partner in everything. We had our share of arguments, like any couple, but I always felt we were a team. His parents, George and Martha, had become like my own. George, a burly, kind-hearted man with a booming laugh, and Martha, a gentle soul who had taken me under her wing from day one. Our relationship was one of mutual respect and affection. Tonight was supposed to be a small celebration, just George and us, marking the end of our mortgage payments. The house was warmly lit, and I had spent the day cooking George's favorite dishes. I remember glancing at the clock, noting Jack's unusual lateness. George arrived first, cheerful as always, but with an undercurrent of concern for his son's tardiness. We chatted in the kitchen, George regaling me with stories of his youth, his laughter filling the room. But as the night grew older, my anxiety crept in. Finally, the doorbell rang, and I rushed to open it, expecting Jack, maybe with a story of traffic or a last-minute work emergency. What I saw instead felt like a scene from a movie. Jack stood there, not alone, but with a young, stylish woman clinging to his arm. She had an air of confidence, almost defiance, as she scanned our home, her eyes lingering on the pictures of our life together on the walls. "Jack, what's going on?" I managed to get out, my voice a mix of confusion and rising anger. Jack looked different. His usual calm demeanor was replaced with a cold, almost cruel smirk. "This is Lana," he said nonchalantly, his grip on her waist possessive. "She's going to be my wife." The words hit me like a freight train. Wife? Jack, are you joking? What about us? Our life together? George, who had come to see what the commotion was about, looked as shocked as I felt. "Jack, son, what are you saying? Mila is your wife." Lana finally spoke, her voice sharp and businesslike. "Looks like a nice place. We'll probably change a few things once it's ours." Jack's next words felt surreal. "Mila, I want a divorce. It's time you left." I was stunned, my mind racing. "Divorce? Jack, we built this life together, and you want to throw it away for her?" George's face was red with anger and disbelief. "Jack, think about what you're doing. This is madness." Jack shrugged, dismissive. "My mind's made up. Start packing, Mila. This house isn't yours anymore." I stood there, rooted to the spot, as George took my arm. "Mila, let's go. You don't need to take this." We left the house, my home, a place filled with memories now tainted by betrayal. I spent the night at George and Martha's, their kindness a small comfort in the storm of my suddenly shattered life. I woke up in George and Martha's guest room, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. The events of last night replayed in my mind, each detail a fresh jab of pain. I could hear George and Martha in the kitchen, their voices a low murmur. Dragging myself out of bed, I stumbled into the kitchen, where George was making coffee and Martha was setting the table. They both looked up as I entered, their faces a mix of concern and anger. "Morning, Mila," George said gruffly, handing me a cup of coffee. "Slept any?" "Not really," I replied, my voice hoarse. "Feels like a nightmare." Martha came over and gave me a hug. "That boy has lost his mind, Mila. You don't deserve this." I sipped the coffee, feeling its warmth but not much else. "I don't know what to do, Martha. My whole life just turned upside down." George slammed his cup on the table, his usual jovial demeanor gone. "We'll not let him get away with this, Mila. He can't just throw you out like yesterday's garbage." Martha nodded, her eyes fierce. "You've put too much into that house, into that marriage. It's not right." I felt a surge of anger, thinking about Jack and Lana in my house. I paid for most of that house. My inheritance, my savings. George's eyes lit up. "That's it. You have rights, Mila. That house is as much yours as it is his." Martha was quick to agree. "Yes, you need to fight for what's yours. Don't let that woman take everything from you." I started to feel a fire building inside me, fueled by their support. "You're right. I won't let Jack and his mistress walk all over me." George stood up, determination on his face. "We'll get a lawyer, someone who can sort this mess out. You won't be alone in this, Mila." Martha squeezed my hand. "We're with you, every step of the way. That boy needs a lesson on how to treat people." Sitting there with them, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could get through this. But I knew it was going to be a long, hard fight. The morning at George and Martha's had stirred something in me, a sense of resolve I hadn't felt in a long time. I spent the day buried in financial records, piecing together every contribution I'd made towards our home. The dining table was littered with bank statements, mortgage documents, and old receipts, tangible proof of my investment in what was supposed to be our shared dream. George, sitting across from me, was meticulously going through each document. "Look at this, Mila. You've paid more than half of the mortgage, and that's not even counting your inheritance. You have a strong claim to the house." I nodded, my fingers tracing the figures that represented years of my life. "I'm going to call Jack. He needs to understand he can't just erase me from his life and take everything we built together." Martha, who had been brewing some coffee, set a cup in front of me. Be clear and stand your ground, Mila. He's used to walking all over you, but not this time. I dialed Jack's number. It rang twice before he picked up. Mila? What do you want? His voice was dismissive, cold. I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves. Jack, I've been looking over our finances. It turns out I've put more money into the house. My inheritance, my savings, it adds up to me owning 2/3 of the house. There was a brief silence on the line. You're joking, right? No, Jack. I'm dead serious. I've calculated it all. If you want to keep the house, you need to buy out my share. That's $266,000. I could almost hear his sneer through the phone. You think you can just demand money out of the blue? This isn't a demand, Jack. It's what I'm owed. It's fair. You can either pay me, or we sell the house and split the money. Your choice. Jack's voice was laced with annoyance. Fine, you'll get your money. But after this, we're done. I hung up, my heart racing. He agreed to pay, I said, half in shock. George was beaming with pride. You did good, Mila. Standing up to him like that. Martha came over and hugged me. I'm proud of you, Mila. You're taking control of your life again. That afternoon, as I sorted through more paperwork, George and Martha shared stories of their own struggles and triumphs, reminding me that resilience was a family trait. We discussed lawyers, next steps, and strategies, turning their kitchen into a war room of sorts. As evening fell, George cooked dinner, a simple stew that filled the house with a comforting aroma. We ate together, talking about everything but the situation at hand, giving me a much-needed break from the stress. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt like I wasn't facing it alone. With George and Martha's support, I had a fighting chance. And as I drifted off to sleep, I clung to that thought like a lifeline. The morning of the divorce proceedings, I walked into the lawyer's office with a steely resolve. The office was cold and sterile, the kind of place where futures were dismantled and rearranged. Jack entered, his face an emotionless mask. He wasn't alone. Lana, his mistress, was glued to his side. Her confidence seemed forced, a thin veneer over her uncertainty. I could feel their surprise as they saw me sitting there, calm and composed. Before Jack could even find his words, I cut to the chase. I'm pregnant, Jack. Jack's eyes widened, his composure slipping. What? Pregnant? Lana's face twisted from confidence to confusion and then to rage. You said you hadn't touched her in months. You lying jerk. I ignored her outburst and continued, I'm asking for alimony, Jack. $800 a month, for the next 21 years. For our child. The lawyer, Mr. Harris, a middle-aged man with a stern face, nodded in approval. Given the circumstances, Mrs. Smith's request is perfectly reasonable. Jack looked like he had been punched. This is insane. You can't just spring this on me and expect me to pay up. I met his gaze squarely. I can and I am. You made your bed, now lie in it. You owe this to our child, if not to me. Lana was fuming, her voice shrill with anger. Jack, you can't do this. She's clearly trying to trap you. Jack, flustered and overwhelmed, ran a hand through his hair. I need time to think. Mr. Harris interjected, Mr. Smith, the law is clear. You have a financial responsibility to your child. Jack slumped into the chair, defeated. Fine, he muttered. I'll pay the alimony. As they left, Lana was hissing into Jack's ear, her facade of poise completely shattered. I remained seated, feeling a mixture of triumph and sadness. This wasn't just about the money, it was about standing up for myself and my future child. In the following weeks, I worked with Mr. Harris to iron out the details. He was impressed with my resolve, often remarking on my newfound toughness. "You're not the same woman who walked into my office a month ago," he said during one of our meetings. I smiled, feeling a sense of empowerment. "I guess I'm not. I have someone else to think about now." As I left his office after signing the final papers, I felt a sense of closure. The battle was tough, but I had come out stronger. I was ready to face whatever came next, not just for me, but for my child as well. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a say in it. After the tumultuous divorce proceedings, I found an unexpected source of strength in Jack's parents, George and Martha. We sat in their cozy living room, a stark contrast to the cold lawyer's office, plotting our next move. George, always a man of action, was pacing the room. "We need to show that scoundrel he can't just trample over our family," he said, his voice tinged with anger. Martha, ever the strategist, added, "We've got to be smart about this. We can't just barge in there and make a scene." I nodded, feeling a mix of gratitude and determination. "I agree. But what can we do? He's made his bed with Lana." George stopped pacing and turned to me. "What if we visit them? Regularly. Make our presence felt. Remind Jack of the family he's turning his back on." Martha's eyes lit up. "Yes, and it'll drive that little homewrecker up the wall. She won't like us being around, reminding her of what she's done." I couldn't help but smile at their cunning plan. "You think it'll work? Make her uncomfortable?" George grinned. "Oh, I'm sure it will. We'll be the most annoying, ever-present in-laws. She won't know what hit her." Martha clapped her hands together. "We'll start tomorrow. A nice, long, unannounced visit." The next day, we executed our plan. George rang the doorbell of what used to be my home, a big smile plastered on his face as Jack opened the door. "Son. We thought we'd drop by. Spend some quality time together," George boomed, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Lana appeared behind Jack, her smile forced. "Oh, what a surprise. And what is she doing here?" Martha breezed past her, adding, "She's with us. We just couldn't stay away. It's been too long." We spent hours there, talking loudly, laughing, and reminiscing about old times, pointedly ignoring Lana's growing discomfort. Every time she tried to interject or change the subject, George or Martha skillfully steered the conversation back. As we left, Lana's frustration was evident. She was fuming, barely managing a fake smile. In the car, Martha chuckled. "Did you see her face? She was about to explode." George was laughing too. "We're just getting started. That girl has no idea what she's in for." I sat in the back seat, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. It was a small, petty victory, but after everything that had happened, it felt good to take some control back, to push back against the injustice of it all. With George and Martha by my side, I felt stronger, ready to face whatever came next. A few weeks after our in-law intervention strategy began, I received unexpected news from Martha during one of our coffee chats. "Mila, you won't believe it. Jack's put the house up for sale," she said, her voice a mix of shock and satisfaction. I almost choked on my coffee. "What? Why would he do that?" Martha shrugged. "Seems like Lana can't stand us being around. She's pushing him to move." I pondered the situation, an idea slowly forming in my mind. "Martha, what if I bought the house back?" George, who had been quietly reading the newspaper, looked up. "Buy it back? You think that's a good idea?" I nodded. "Yes, but at a lower price. Jack's desperate, and I have the money from the settlement. It's perfect." Martha smiled slyly. That would be quite the turn of events. Imagine Lana's face if she knew. I contacted a realtor friend, explaining the situation and my plan. She agreed to help, ensuring my identity remained hidden during the negotiations. A week later, I sat with my realtor friend, discussing our strategy. Jack's asking for a high price, but we know he's desperate. Let's lowball him. My realtor nodded. I'll start the negotiations. He won't know it's you until the deal is sealed. The negotiations went back and forth for days. Finally, Jack caved, accepting a much lower offer than his initial asking price. My realtor friend called me with the news. We got it, Mila. He accepted the offer, she said, barely containing her excitement. I couldn't help but laugh. I can't believe it. I'm buying my house back. The day we closed the deal, I met my realtor at the office. You're now the proud owner of your old house, she said, handing me the keys. The day I reclaimed my house was a day of triumph. I stood outside the familiar front door, the weight of the keys in my hands symbolizing so much more than mere ownership. My heart pounded with a mix of excitement and apprehension as I prepared to face Jack and Lana one last time in what was once our shared home. Unlocking the door, I stepped inside. The sight of Jack and Lana, surrounded by boxes in the midst of packing, brought a sense of surreal finality. They both looked up, shock and disbelief etched on their faces. What the hell, Mila? How did you get in here? Jack's voice was a mixture of anger and confusion. I couldn't help but smirk. Oh, didn't you hear? I'm the new owner. Surprise! Lana's face turned a shade of red, her eyes wide in shock. You? This has to be some kind of sick joke. Crossing my arms, I leaned against the door frame. No joke, Lana. I bought the house. It's mine now, and you two are trespassing. Jack's face contorted with anger. This is low, even for you, Mila. You think you can just waltz back in here and take over? I straightened up, my voice firm and unwavering. Yes, Jack, that's exactly what I'm doing. You wanted me out, and now I'm back. My house, my rules. Time for you to leave. Lana, fuming, spat out, You can't do this. We have rights. I walked into the living room, standing my ground. The only right you have right now is to walk out of my house. I suggest you do it quickly. Jack, realizing the futility of arguing, began to gather his belongings. Lana followed suit, her movements jerky with frustration. As they left, Lana hissed at me, "You haven't won anything, Mila." Watching them leave, I felt a surge of empowerment. This house, which had witnessed the rise and fall of my marriage, was now a symbol of my resilience. It was a battleground where I had emerged victorious. After the door closed behind them, I walked through the empty rooms. Each space echoed with memories, both good and bad, but now it was time to make new ones. I envisioned the house filled with laughter and love once more, a sanctuary for me and my future child. Sitting down in the quiet living room, I allowed myself a moment to take it all in. I had come full circle, but this time, I was in control, a victor reclaiming her kingdom. The journey had been fraught with pain and betrayal, but it had led me to this moment of triumph. My house, my rules, my life. I was ready to start anew, stronger and more determined than ever. One afternoon, as I was arranging the nursery for my soon-to-arrive baby, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find George and Martha, beaming with smiles. "Mila, dear, how are you holding up?" Martha asked as she stepped inside, her eyes taking in the changes I'd made. "I'm doing well, Martha." "Getting ready for the baby," I replied, leading them into the living room. George, carrying a bag of baby clothes, chuckled. "This little one is going to be spoiled rotten by us, you know that, right?" I laughed, the sound bright and genuine. I wouldn't have it any other way. As we sat, chatting and laughing, another knock came at the door. This time, it was Jack. He looked different, worn out, a little defeated. "Can we talk, Mila?" Jack's voice was low, lacking its usual confidence. I hesitated but nodded, stepping outside to talk to him privately. I messed up, Mila, Jack started, not meeting my eyes. Lana left me. I'm broke, and I was hoping. I cut him off, my voice steady. Hoping for what, Jack? For me to take you back? After everything? Jack's face crumpled. I know I don't deserve it, but I have nowhere else to go. I looked at him, the man I once loved, now just a stranger filled with regrets. Jack, I've moved on. I'm starting a new life, for me and my baby. You need to do the same. He nodded slowly, the reality of the situation sinking in. I understand. I'm sorry, Mila. As he walked away, I felt a closure I didn't know I needed. Turning back to the house, I saw George and Martha watching through the window, their expressions a mix of concern and support. He won't bother you again, will he? George asked as I walked back in. I shook my head. No, he won't. I made it clear. Martha hugged me. You're so strong, Mila. We're so proud of you. Sitting back down, surrounded by the people who had become my true family, I felt a sense of peace. The journey had been long and fraught with pain, but it had led me here, to a place of strength and new beginnings. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape, and I looked forward to every moment of it. I'm Martha, a 28-year-old massage therapist at a local hospital. My days usually involved routine treatments until Mrs. Rossi, a feisty retired woman with osteochondrosis, became my regular patient. She had a knack for prying into personal matters, which I usually navigated with a mix of professionalism and humor. One afternoon, as I was working on her stiff shoulders, Mrs. Rossi's voice cut through the room's tranquility. Martha, dear, you have such magical hands. Tell me, what does a job like this pay? I smiled, continuing my motions. It's around $4,000 a month, Mrs. Rossi. She clucked her tongue in a mix of surprise and disappointment. Only $4,000? I thought such a skill would fetch more. I shrugged, keeping the conversation light. Well, it's enough for me. I enjoy the work more than anything. Changing gears, she suddenly said. You know who you should meet? My son, Antonio. He's the owner of that Italian restaurant downtown. A real catch, if I may say so. I hesitated, recalling the few times I saw Antonio. He was quite charming and easy on the eyes. I don't know, Mrs. Rossi. I'm quite busy with work. Oh, nonsense, she exclaimed. A young, attractive woman like you shouldn't be alone. Let me arrange something. Before I could protest, she had already made up her mind. True to her word, she set us up on a date at his restaurant. Antonio was more than I remembered, charming, with a warm smile and eyes that sparkled with humor. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, filled with laughter and shared interests. Weeks turned into months, and our casual dates grew into a serious relationship. One evening, as we walked along the river, Antonio stopped and looked into my eyes. Martha, I've never met anyone like you. Will you marry me? His proposal took me by surprise, but it felt right. Yes, Antonio, I will. Our wedding was a small affair but full of love and joy. Afterward, Antonio suggested, why don't we move in with my mom? Her house is big, and we could save some money for our future. The idea seemed practical, and I agreed. Initially, life in the Rossi household was harmonious. I helped with chores, and we both contributed to the family expenses. Little did I know that this new chapter of my life would soon take a challenging turn. Living in the Rossi household started off as an agreeable arrangement, but a few months into our marriage, I began to notice a shift in responsibilities. It was gradual at first, but soon, the burden of household chores fell almost entirely on my shoulders. One weary evening, after spending the whole day relieving tense muscles and soothing aching joints at the hospital, I came home to a scene of chaos, dirty dishes piled high, laundry scattered, and the living room looking like it had been hit by a small tornado. Exhausted, I found Antonio sprawled on the sofa, engrossed in a football game. Antonio, the house is a mess. Can you help me clean up? I asked, trying to hide my frustration. He glanced around, seemingly oblivious. Oh, it's not that bad, Martha. I had a rough day at the restaurant, lots of issues to deal with. I started picking up, feeling the day's fatigue weigh me down. But you've been home for a while now, and I've just got back. It's only fair we both contribute. He let out a non-committal grunt, eyes glued to the screen. You're better at this stuff than I am. I'd just get in the way. This pattern continued, growing more defined with each passing day. I found myself doing all the cooking, cleaning, and managing the home, while Antonio's contributions became increasingly scarce. A few days later, I decided to have a serious talk with him. After dinner, which I had prepared, I broached the topic. Antonio, we need to discuss the housework. It's becoming overwhelming for me to handle everything alone. He looked up from his phone, seemingly annoyed. What's there to discuss, Martha? You're great at managing the house. I'm busy with the restaurant. His dismissive attitude stung. But we're a team, Antonio. It's not just about being good at something. We should share these responsibilities. He sighed, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. Look, I'll try to help out more, but you know my work is demanding. I'm running a whole business, not just giving massages. I bit back a sharp retort, feeling belittled and misunderstood. It's not about comparing jobs, Antonio. It's about supporting each other. As the days turned into weeks, the situation didn't improve. Antonio's promises to help more around the house remained unfulfilled. I found myself spending my few free hours doing household chores, feeling more like a housekeeper than his wife. One evening, as I collapsed on the couch after a long day, the reality of my situation hit me hard. The balance in our marriage had shifted dangerously, leaving me drained and undervalued. I realized that something needed to change, but I wasn't sure how to make Antonio see it too. The day Luca and his family moved in marked the beginning of an entirely new, exhausting chapter in our lives. Antonio broke the news to me nonchalantly, as if it was a minor change. Martha, Luca lost his job. They can't pay rent, so they'll stay with us for a while, he explained, while I was setting the table for dinner. I stopped in my tracks, the plates in my hands feeling heavier. For how long, Antonio? Our house isn't that big, and I'm already stretched thin. He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. Just for a bit, until Luca finds a new job. It's family, Martha. We can't turn them away. Their arrival turned our already bustling household upside down. Anna, Luca's wife, seemed more interested in her social media than in managing her children or helping around the house. Their 3 kids, aged between 3 and 8, were little bundles of chaotic energy, leaving a trail of mess wherever they went. One afternoon, after stepping on a toy car for the umpteenth time, I approached Anna, who was scrolling through her phone. Anna, could you please keep an eye on the kids? The house is turning into a war zone. She looked up, annoyance flickering in her eyes. Martha, I'm busy with my own stuff. You don't have kids, you wouldn't understand. But Anna, the mess and noise are overwhelming. I work too, and it's becoming impossible to manage, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She scoffed. Well, I guess you just need to get better at multitasking, then. I walked away, feeling a mixture of anger and helplessness. When I brought it up with Antonio, hoping for some support, his response was disheartening. Babe, they're family. We need to be there for them, he said, not looking up from the TV. But what about us, our home? It's turning into chaos, I protested. He waved his hand dismissively. It's not permanent. Besides, you handle things so well, Martha. You're great at this. Weeks turned into months with no sign of improvement. Luca spent his days on the computer, claiming to be job hunting, while the kids ran around unchecked. Anna rarely lifted a finger to help, leaving me to deal with the aftermath of their daily tornado. I started to dread coming home. My once peaceful haven was now a source of endless stress. Each day, I walked into a house that no longer felt like mine, catering to a family that barely acknowledged my exhaustion. The burden of cooking, cleaning, and maintaining order fell entirely on me. Despite my pleas for help or even just a little consideration, I was met with the same responses. "You're so good at this, Martha," or "it's just for a little longer." I lay awake at night, wondering how a situation meant to be temporary had become my new, overwhelming reality. I felt trapped, undervalued, and utterly alone in a house full of people. The funny thing is that I invested my entire salary in their family every month, all of $4,000. And they took it for granted. The tension in the house had been building like a pressure cooker, and it finally exploded one hectic evening. I came home to the usual chaos and mess, utterly exhausted from my workday. The sight of the unkempt house was the last straw. "Antonio!" I yelled, finding him lounging on the couch with a beer in hand. "This house is a disaster. I'm busting my back at work and I come home to this mess every day." Antonio looked up, irritation flashing in his eyes. "Oh, cut the drama, Martha. It's just a bit messy. You're acting like it's the end of the world." I couldn't contain my frustration. "A bit messy? Look around. It's like a pigsty and I'm the only one cleaning it up." That's when he lost it. He stood up abruptly, towering over me. "Lazy? You call this lazy? I work my ass off at the restaurant while you just rub people's backs. And now you whine about a few dishes." His harsh words felt like a slap in the face. "That's not fair, Antonio. I'm not your maid. This is supposed to be our home, not just mine to clean." Before I could say more, Mrs. Rossi chimed in, her voice dripping with disdain. "Oh, please, Martha. You're just a freeloader here, living in my house, using our things. And you have the nerve to complain." I was taken aback by her vicious tone. "A freeloader? Mrs. Rossi, I contribute to this house, I work hard too." She scoffed. "Work hard? Ha! A real woman takes care of her home and family. You're just sloppy and ungrateful." Their words echoed in my head, each one a stinging affirmation of how little they valued me. I stood there, shaking with a mix of anger, shock, and hurt. Antonio didn't let up. "You should be thankful, Martha. You have a roof over your head because of us. Maybe if you managed your time better, the house wouldn't be such a mess." I felt a surge of defiance. "I am not your servant, Antonio. I am your wife, and I deserve respect." But it was like talking to a brick wall. They had their minds set, seeing me as nothing more than an accessory to their home. Lying in bed that night, I realized that this wasn't a home, it was a prison. And I was trapped with people who saw my efforts as trivial and my presence as a nuisance. It was a sobering, painful realization that I was in a battle I was losing. The day Antonio announced he wanted a divorce felt like a surreal nightmare. It happened during one of our rare family dinners, where the tension was already thick enough to cut with a knife. I was passing the salad when Antonio cleared his throat. "Everyone, I have something to say," he announced, his voice eerily calm. "I want a divorce, Martha." I froze, the bowl in my hands almost slipping. "What? Antonio, what are you talking about?" His gaze was cold, devoid of the warmth I once knew. "I've met someone else, Martha. She's better for me." The room went silent. Even Mrs. Rossi looked shocked, but not for the reasons I hoped. "How much does she earn?" she blurted out, her priorities crystal clear. $8,000 a month, Antonio replied proudly, as if he'd won some prize. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "You're leaving me for money?" He shrugged, the man I married nowhere in sight. "It's not just about the money, Martha. She understands me, unlike you." I was struggling to process everything. "And you think this is okay? To drop this bomb in front of everyone?" Mrs. Rossi piped up, her voice sharp. "Well, it's about time he found someone worthy. Someone who can actually take care of him." The sting of her words was overshadowed by the utter betrayal I felt from Antonio. He slid the divorce papers across the table. "Just sign these, Martha. Let's end this amicably." My hands trembled as I took the pen. I felt numb, the reality of the situation sinking in. Amicably? After everything I've done for this family? Antonio's expression was cold, detached. "It's for the best, Martha. You'll see." With a heavy heart and a sense of unreal detachment, I signed the papers. The room remained silent, the only sound being the scratching of the pen on paper. As I stood up, the weight of the situation finally hit me. "I hope she's worth it, Antonio. I really do," I said, my voice laced with a relief I couldn't hide. I packed my things that night, the silence of the house echoing the hollowness I felt inside. Antonio and his family watched, their faces a mix of surprise and confusion at my calm demeanor. Little did they know, inside, I was even rejoicing at the thought of being free from this toxic environment. I closed the door behind me, leaving behind a life that was no longer mine. The night air felt crisp and refreshing, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere I had just escaped. As I walked away, I realized this was not an end, but a new beginning. Moving into my rented apartment was like stepping into a new world. I took all the furniture and fancy appliances I had bought, leaving behind nothing but empty spaces in Antonio's family home. It caused quite the uproar. I still remember the day Mrs. Rossi and Anna confronted me as I was loading the last of my things into the moving truck. "You can't just take all this stuff. It belongs in the house," Mrs. Rossi shouted, her face red with anger. I turned to face her, feeling a surge of defiance. "Actually, I bought all of this with my own money. It's mine, and I'm taking it with me," Anna chimed in, her tone dripping with disdain. "You're such a selfish brat, Martha. You think you can just walk away and take everything?" I shrugged, not letting their words get to me. "Call it what you want, but I'm done being your maid and your family's cash cow. I'm starting over." They were fuming as I drove away, but I felt an immense sense of relief, like I had shed a heavy burden. Settling into my new place, I reveled in the peace and quiet. It was small, but it was mine. The day I received the job offer from the prestigious medical center was the icing on the cake. The salary was nearly double what I was making before. I remember calling Sarah to share the news. "Guess what? I got a job offer from that famous medical center. It's a big leap in my career, and the pay is amazing." Sarah's excitement mirrored mine. "Martha, that's fantastic. You totally deserve this. You're going to kill it." The conversation was a stark contrast to the ones I had in Antonio's house. Here was a friend who believed in me and celebrated my achievements, not someone who saw me as just a means to an end. My first day at the new job was exhilarating. I was greeted with respect. Mr. Johnson, the center's director, welcomed me personally. "Martha, we're thrilled to have you on board. Your expertise is going to be a great asset to our team," he said with a genuine smile. I couldn't help but beam with pride. "Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I'm excited to be here and contribute to the center." Leaving the chaos of Antonio's family home and stepping into this new role was empowering. It felt like I had finally taken control of my life, steering it in the direction I wanted. The days of being undervalued and overburdened were behind me. Now, I was recognized for my worth, both professionally and personally. That night, as I sat in my quiet living room, sipping a cup of tea, I felt a profound sense of peace. The struggles and hardships had led me to this moment, and I was grateful for the journey. For the first time in a long while, I was genuinely excited about what the future held. It was a regular evening in my new life when I heard a forceful knock on my door. I opened it to find my ex-mother-in-law, Mrs. Rossi, standing there with an expression that reeked of desperation and frustration. "What do you want, Mrs. Rossi?" I asked, not hiding my annoyance. She barged in, her voice laced with urgency. "Martha, you need to come back. Antonio's restaurant is tanking. We're drowning in debt." I couldn't help but snort. "Come back? After the way you all treated me? You've got some nerve." She glared at me. You're part of this family. It's your responsibility to help us out. I crossed my arms, feeling a surge of defiance. My only responsibility is to myself. I'm not your family's ATM, Mrs. Rossi. She was seething. You ungrateful wench. You think you're too good for us now, huh? Sitting pretty in your fancy apartment? I shook my head, amused by her audacity. I'm not ungrateful. I'm just done being used. What happened to that woman Antonio left me for? Mrs. Rossi's face twisted in displeasure. That gold digger? She left him as soon as the money troubles started. Shows what she was really after. I burst into laughter, the irony too rich to ignore. Well, looks like karma really does come around. Her eyes narrowed. You think this is funny? We're struggling here, Martha. I leaned against the door frame, my resolve firm. Not my circus, not my monkeys anymore, Mrs. Rossi. I've moved on. You should too. She huffed, her anger palpable. You'll regret this, Martha. When you're all alone and miserable, you'll wish you'd helped. I smiled, the sense of freedom filling me with confidence. I doubt that. Goodbye, Mrs. Rossi. And don't come back. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. As I locked it, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. That chapter of my life was closed for good. I was finally free from the toxic grasp of a family that never truly valued me. My life was my own now, and I intended to live it on my terms. Life after the divorce and the last encounter with Mrs. Rossi felt like a breath of fresh air. I was thriving in my new job and enjoying my newfound independence. One day, while enjoying a coffee break at the wellness center, my colleague Mike dropped by. Hey, Martha, I heard about your run-in with the ex-mother-in-law. You okay? Mike asked, concern in his eyes. I chuckled, shaking my head. More than okay, Mike. It's like a bad sitcom, you know? I'm just glad it's over. Mike smiled. You've got some guts, Martha. Most people wouldn't have handled it as well as you did. I sipped my coffee, feeling a sense of pride. I guess I just reached my limit, Mike. No more drama for me. The conversation shifted to work, and as I talked with Mike, I realized how much my life had improved. I was no longer weighed down by the negativity and manipulation of my former family. Later that week, I caught up with Sarah over dinner. She had been my steadfast supporter through all the ups and downs. You look great, Martha. Really, like a weight's been lifted off your shoulders, Sarah observed as we sat in a cozy restaurant. I smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude. Thanks, Sarah. It's been a journey, but I'm finally at a place where I feel happy and in control. Sarah raised her glass. To new beginnings and to a friend who's shown what strength really is. I clinked my glass with hers. To new beginnings and to friends who stand by you through thick and thin. The evening was filled with laughter and positive conversations, a stark contrast to the tense and uncomfortable dinners at my former in-laws. As I lay in bed that night, I reflected on the changes in my life. I had faced adversity, but it had led to growth and new opportunities. I had learned my worth and vowed never to let anyone treat me as less than I deserved. The following morning, I received a text from Antonio. It was short and seemed filled with regret. I'm sorry for everything, Martha. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me. I stared at the message for a long moment. Forgiving Antonio wasn't about absolving him of his mistakes, it was about freeing myself from any lingering bitterness. I typed a response, my heart light and free. Antonio, I've moved on. I forgive you, but more for my peace than yours. Take care. Sending the text felt like closing a chapter. I was no longer bound by the past, and the future looked bright. I had come out of this ordeal stronger and more resilient. As I prepared for work, I felt a sense of excitement about the possibilities that lay ahead. My journey had taught me about resilience, self-worth, and the power of moving forward. I was ready for whatever life had in store for me, and I knew that no matter what, I had the strength to face it head-on. Growing up, I always knew I was different from the rest of my family. My name's Jenny, and I come from a long line of restaurant owners. My dad, Joe, is a big, loud man who runs our family restaurant with an iron fist. Mom, Linda, is his perfect partner, always busy managing the staff. Then there's my older brother, Mike, the golden boy, groomed to take over the business. I remember sitting at the dinner table one night, the air thick with the aroma of Dad's famous roast. Mom was going on about some new recipe they were trying out. "Jenny, you'll love this one. It's got that fancy herb you like." "What's it called again?" Mom asked, her eyes sparkling. "Thyme," I mumbled, picking at my food. Mike laughed from across the table, his mouth full. "Who cares about some dumb herb? Wait till you see the new grill Dad's getting for the restaurant. That's the real deal." Dad nodded, his eyes on me. "Speaking of the restaurant, Jenny, when are you gonna start taking an interest? You're not getting any younger, you know." I tried to make myself small in my chair. "I don't know, Dad. I like being outside, with the plants and stuff." Mom sighed, exchanging a look with Dad. "Plants? What are you gonna do with plants? You need a real job, Jenny. Something to fall back on." I remember feeling a knot in my stomach. It was the same conversation every time. No one in my family got it. No one except Grandma Rose. Grandma Rose lived in a small house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by the most beautiful garden I'd ever seen. She was different from my parents, gentle, patient, and she understood me in a way no one else did. I would often escape to her house, away from the endless talk of the restaurant. One day, I found her in the garden, her hands deep in the soil. "Jenny, dear, come help me plant these tulips," she said, her face bright with a smile. I sat down beside her, feeling the cool dirt on my hands. "Grandma, why don't Mom and Dad understand? I love this. I love being here with the plants." Grandma Rose wiped her brow and looked at me with those wise, old eyes. "Your parents just want what's best for you, Jenny. But they don't see the world the same way we do. There's magic in these plants, in the earth. It's okay to be different." I clung to Grandma Rose's words, even as the pressure from my family grew. Mike would often taunt me, calling me the gardener in a tone that made it sound like an insult. "Hey, gardener, you gonna plant some lettuce for tonight's salad?" he'd jeer, his friends laughing behind him. I'd just roll my eyes and walk away. I knew they didn't get it. They didn't see the beauty in a single leaf, the peace in a morning dew. But I did. And in those moments, with my hands in the soil, I felt like I was where I belonged. High school graduation was like standing at a crossroads, and I, Jenny, was about to take the road less traveled by my family. The house was buzzing with excitement over Mike's plans to join Dad at the restaurant. Amidst it all, I felt like a spectator in my own life. One evening, we were all gathered in the living room. Dad was going on about expanding the restaurant, his eyes gleaming with ambition. "Mike, you're going to be right at the heart of this," he said, clapping my brother on the back. Mike puffed up like a proud rooster. "Yeah, I've got some ideas already, Dad. We're gonna make this place huge." I sat there, fiddling with a loose thread on the couch, feeling invisible. Mom turned to me, her voice sharp like she was waking me up from a daydream. "And what about you, Jenny? Ready to step up? You can handle the front desk, learn the ropes." I took a deep breath. It was now or never. "Actually, I'm not going to work at the restaurant. I'm going to study landscape design," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The room went silent. Dad's face turned red, like a tomato about to burst. "Landscape what now?" he barked. "That's no career for you. You're a part of this family, and the restaurant is our legacy." Mike snickered. "What are you gonna do? Plant flowers for a living?" I felt my cheeks burning. "Yes, Actually, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm good at it, and I love it. Mom's face was a mix of confusion and worry. Jenny, be sensible. You can't make a living off playing in the dirt. I stood up, feeling a surge of defiance. It's not just playing in the dirt, Mom. It's creating something beautiful, something real. I'm not asking for your approval, but I am telling you, this is my decision. Dad slammed his hand on the table, his voice booming. If you choose this foolishness, you're on your own. Don't expect any help from us. I felt a knot in my stomach, but my voice was steady. Fine, I'll do it on my own. Grandma Rose, who had been quietly knitting in the corner, finally spoke. Her voice was calm but carried weight. Joe, let the girl follow her heart. She's got a gift, and it would be a sin to waste it, she said, her eyes fixed on Dad. Dad let out a frustrated grunt, turning away. Fine, do what you want. But don't come crying to us when it all falls apart. I turned to leave the room, my heart pounding. Mike called out after me, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Good luck, Gardner. Let's see how far those flowers get you. Stepping into college life felt like diving into deep water. It was thrilling, yet daunting. Jenny, was far from the familiar paths of my family's expectations, ready to carve my own way in the world of landscape design. I still remember the buzz of the first day in class, the room swirling with the energy of eager students. I found a spot in the back, trying to shrink into the shadows. That's when Zoe, a girl with fire engine red hair and eyes full of mischief, dropped into the seat next to me. Hey, there, newbie, I'm Zoe. First-timer in landscape design? I gave a shy nod. Yeah, I'm Jenny. It's all a bit overwhelming. Zoe's laugh was loud and genuine. You'll fit right in. Wait till you get your hands into the real dirt. It's epic. What dragged you into this world? I hesitated, the sting of my family's disapproval still fresh. I've always loved plants, the outdoors. It's where I feel right, you know? Her grin widened. Perfect place for you then. Classes were a whirlwind of learning and creating. I was absorbing things like a sponge, from the science of soils to the art of design. I was finally speaking a language I loved. After one particularly intense session, Mr. Davidson, our professor, a man as tall and sturdy as an oak, called me over. Jenny, your designs, there's something else. You've got a real knack for this, he said, his voice serious but encouraging. I was stunned. Really? Thank you, Mr. Davidson. I'm just trying to do my best. He leaned forward, his eyes piercing. There's potential in you. Don't let it go to waste. Push harder. His words became my mantra. I started to live in the studio, my designs becoming more ambitious, more expressive. It was exhausting, but exhilarating. But even in those moments of joy, a part of me yearned for my family, despite everything. One quiet evening, I gathered the courage to call home. The phone rang, each tone heavy with anticipation. Finally, Mom's voice came through, sharp like a knife's edge. What do you want, Jenny? Her tone stung, but I pushed on. I just wanted to check in, see how everyone is. She snorted, her voice dripping with scorn. Oh, now you care? After running off to play in the dirt, abandoning your own family. I clenched my teeth, fighting to keep my voice steady. I didn't abandon anyone, Mom. I just chose a different path. Her laugh was bitter. A dead-end path, you mean? Don't expect us to be here waiting when it all crumbles around you. The call ended soon after, leaving a sour taste in my mouth. But it also fueled a fire in me. I dove back into my work with a new intensity, determined to prove not just to my family, but to myself, that I was on the right path. Life has a way of throwing curveballs, and mine came in the form of a phone call during my final year of college. It was Aunt Clara, my mom's sister, her voice shaky and strained. "Jenny, it's about your Grandma Rose. She passed away last night," Aunt Clara said, her voice cracking with emotion. I felt the ground slip away beneath me. Grandma Rose had been my rock, the one person who believed in my dreams. Losing her felt like losing a part of myself. The funeral was a somber affair. My family was there, all stiff and formal. Dad, Mom, and Mike looked like strangers to me. After the service, I overheard Mom talking to Aunt Clara. "I still can't believe she left that house to Jenny. What's she going to do with it? She can barely take care of herself," Mom said, her voice dripping with disapproval. I felt a surge of anger but bit my tongue. I didn't want a confrontation, not there, not then. The will reading was a few days later. Grandma Rose had left me her house, the beautiful garden haven where I had spent countless hours. My family was shocked, their whispers sharp as thorns. "Why would she leave it to Jenny? She's never around anyway," Mike muttered under his breath. Dad's face was like thunder. "This is ridiculous. That house could have been sold, put money into the restaurant." I stood up, my voice steady but firm. Grandma knew I loved that house, that garden. It was where we spent so much time together. I'm going to keep it, just as she wanted. Mom's response was cold and harsh. "So, you're just going to live there alone, playing in the dirt? What a waste." Their words stung, but I had made up my mind. I moved into Grandma's house, immersing myself in the garden she had loved so dearly. I started renovating the place, pouring my heart into every plant, every flower bed. As the months passed, I transformed Grandma's garden into something truly special. It became my sanctuary, a place where I could be myself, away from the judgment and expectations of my family. The day the invitation to Mike's wedding arrived at my doorstep was a day of mixed feelings. It was a fancy piece of paper, golden letters against a white background, representing a part of my life I had left behind. Staring at it, I felt a storm of emotions churn inside me. I decided to go, but on my terms. I dressed in a way that felt true to me, elegant but simple, a far cry from the dirt-stained clothes they remembered. Entering the restaurant, the sights and sounds of my past life engulfed me. I spotted my family across the room. Mom, Dad, and Mike, all decked out, looking like a picture-perfect family. I braced myself and walked over. "Jenny? I didn't think you'd accept the invitation." Mom's voice was sharp, cutting through the noise. "I came to see Mike get married." "It's a family event, isn't it?" I replied, trying to keep my voice level. Mike glanced at me, his smirk familiar and unwelcome. "What's the matter?" Ran out of bushes to trim. Decided to play dress-up for a change? I felt a familiar sting, but I brushed it off. "I'm just here to wish you well, Mike." It was then that his bride, a tall woman with a haughty look, chimed in. "Oh, this is the infamous Gardner sister? Did you manage to scrub the dirt from under your nails, dear, or is that your natural look?" Her words, sharp and mocking, hung in the air. I clenched my jaw, refusing to let her see how deep they cut. "I clean up just fine, thanks for asking." "Congratulations to you both." Dad's eyes were cold, his voice colder. "Your being here doesn't erase the past, Jenny. You chose your path." Their words were like thorns, but I had grown a thick skin. "I'm not here to rehash old arguments. Just wanted to wish Mike a happy married life." I was quickly ushered to a small table in the corner, away from the family. Sitting there, I could feel the curious stares and hushed whispers. "That's the gardener," they whispered, "the black sheep of the family." But as I sat there, a sense of pride welled up in me. Yes, I was the gardener, the one who had dared to follow her own path. I was no longer the shy, unsure girl they remembered, but a woman who had found her strength, who had bloomed in spite of them. My discomfort only grew as the evening stretched on. Sipping my drink, I tried to make myself invisible, but that plan fell apart when I caught the eye of some guys I knew from childhood, Mike's friends, the same ones who used to join him in mocking me. "Look who's here, the family's little dirt digger," one of them, Jake, jeered as they approached, a sneer plastered on his face. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Actually, it's landscape designer. But I wouldn't expect you to understand the difference." Their laughter was harsh, grating. "Oh, listen to her, thinks she's all high and mighty now. Chris," another one, added with a scoff. I bit back a sharp retort, my hands clenching under the table. "I've worked hard for my success. My job is more than just playing in the dirt." Their amusement was cut short when an elderly man at the next table interjected. He'd been listening, his expression growing increasingly disapproving. "I've seen this young lady's work. The new park downtown, that's hers. It's outstanding. Shows what you know." The group was visibly taken aback, their smugness faltering. Muttering under their breath, they slunk away, their egos bruised. Emboldened, I decided to venture out from my safe corner, mingling through the crowd, dodging glances and whispers. That's when I overheard Mike, speaking to a group of his friends. "She's always been the odd one, more into her plants than real work," Mike said, his voice laced with a mix of amusement and disdain. His friend laughed loudly. "Every family's got its black sheep, huh?" Their words were like a slap, raw and stinging. I walked away, my heart pounding, reminding myself their opinions didn't define me. As I weaved through the crowd, I bumped into my cousin Lucy, a quiet presence in our loud family. "Hey, Jenny. I've seen some of your designs. They're really something," she said, her voice sincere. I managed a small smile. "Thanks, Lucy. It means a lot, especially today." Lucy looked at me, her eyes understanding. "I never agreed with how they treated you. You're doing amazing things. I'm glad you stuck to your path." Her words were a small comfort amidst the thorns of the evening. We chatted briefly, a momentary respite from the tension. As Lucy drifted away, I returned to my corner, feeling the weight of the evening. The loud music, the clinking glasses, and the bursts of laughter around me felt like they were happening in a different world. I sat there, sipping my drink, longing for the celebration to end. The wedding night was winding down, its fancy aura overshadowed by my own tangled feelings. Just when I thought the night couldn't get any more surreal, the mayor, a distant relative of Mike's bride, took the stage for his speech. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's a delight to be here," he began, his voice booming across the room. "But tonight, I want to highlight a special guest among us, a true star in the world of landscape design, Jenny." Hearing my name, I almost choked on my drink. I stood up hesitantly, feeling like a deer caught in headlights. The mayor beamed at me. "Jenny here is the brilliant mind behind the transformation of our city park. She's a celebrated landscape designer who's won multiple awards for her incredible work. Let's give her the recognition she deserves." The room erupted into applause, a sound that felt foreign to me. I glanced at my family's table and saw them, their faces a mix of shock and embarrassment. Mike's bride leaned towards him, her voice dripping with disbelief. "Is he talking about your sister, the gardener?" Mike mumbled something, looking like he wished the floor would swallow him up. The mayor's praise continued. "Jenny's work has revitalized our city. She's a true talent." Amidst the clapping, I felt a surge of confidence. The mayor's words were like a light, dispelling the shadows of doubt and scorn from my family. Then, seizing the moment, I decided to speak up. "Thank you, Mayor, for your kind words. It's an honor to contribute to our city's beauty." I paused, my gaze sweeping over the crowd, settling on my family. "It's funny, isn't it? How life turns out. Mike, you and your bride are perfect for each other. Your shared talent for rudeness to others is quite remarkable." The room went silent, the air thick with tension. My parents, my brother, and his fiancée blushed deep red, their shame as visible as if I'd slapped them. Mom's voice cut through the silence, sharp as a knife. Jenny, what are you saying? This is your brother's wedding. I met her gaze, unflinching. Just speaking the truth, Mom. Something our family seems to struggle with. Mike stood up, his face red with anger. You can't come here and talk to us like that. I held my ground, my voice steady. I've earned my right to speak, Mike. Maybe it's time you all listened. The confrontation ended with Mike sitting down, defeated, and the room slowly buzzing back to life. The mayor gave me a nod of respect before moving on. As I sat back down, the weight of the night lifted slightly. I had spoken my piece, stood up for myself in a way I never had before. I was no longer just the gardener or the outcast. I was Jenny, a recognized landscape designer, someone who had grown past her family's narrow expectations. After Mike's wedding, word got out about my success as a landscape designer. People were buzzing about the awards I'd won and the projects I'd aced. It felt like stepping into the sunlight after years in the shadows. And then, my family came calling. One afternoon, while I was busy sketching out a new garden design, my phone rang. It was Mom. Her voice had a sweetness to it that felt out of place. Jenny, darling, we've been hearing so much about your work. Your father and I are so proud of you, she cooed. I raised an eyebrow. Really? That's a change of tune. There was a pause on the line. Well, we were thinking, maybe you could come over. We'd love to see you, catch up on things. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. Catch up, or catch onto my bank account, I shot back. Mom's voice faltered. Jenny, that's not fair. We're family. The word family hit a nerve. Family? Like when you all but disown me for following my dreams. Seems like family matters when there's money in the picture. Before she could respond, I ended the call. I wasn't about to let them back into my life just because they smelled success. A few days later, there was a knock at my door. Mike was standing there, hands in his pockets, looking everywhere but at me. Hey, Jenny, can we talk? He mumbled. I crossed my arms. This should be good. What do you want, Mike? He shifted uncomfortably. Look, I know we haven't been great. But you're doing well, and I was wondering if you could, help me out a bit. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Help you out? After years of calling me the gardener and laughing at my ambitions. Mike's face reddened. I didn't mean it like that. It's just that things are tough, and I cut him off. Save it, Mike. I'm not your ATM. You and the family made it clear how you felt about me. You can't just waltz back into my life when it's convenient. He opened his mouth to argue, but I stopped him. No, Mike. You made your bed. Now lie in it. After he left, I sat in my garden, surrounded by the beauty I had created. My phone rang a few more times over the next week, more attempts at reconciliation from my family, but I didn't answer. I was done with their fair-weather affection. I had built a life for myself, one that didn't need their validation or their greed. I was thriving in my own right, and that was all that mattered. They had chosen their path, and I had chosen mine. As I looked around at the plants and flowers that were a testament to my hard work and passion, I realized I had everything I needed right here. I was happy, successful, and free from the toxic ties that had once bound me. This wasn't just the end of a chapter, it was the beginning of a whole new book. My book. And I was going to make sure it was a bestseller, written on my own terms, in my own style. The new growth in my life was just starting, and I was ready for whatever came next. Hi, everyone. I'm Jane, your everyday 27-year-old who got more than she bargained for. I was just another number cruncher until my life took a sharp turn a few years back. This is my story, no frills, just the raw deal. It all started when I switched jobs and joined this new firm as an accountant. That's where Mark came into the picture. He was the sales guy, confident, charming, and with a smile that could sell ice to Eskimos. We first bumped into each other in the break room, and our chat started over the world's most temperamental coffee machine. "Hey, you're the new accountant, right?" Mark leaned casually against the doorframe, a smirk playing on his lips. "Guilty as charged." "I'm Jane. And you are?" I responded, trying to look unimpressed, but internally, I was already intrigued. "I'm Mark, head of sales." "And unofficially, the resident coffee machine whisperer," he said with a wink. We both laughed, and from that day, things just clicked between us. Fast forward 2 years, and Mark planned the most romantic proposal you could imagine. A weekend trip to the beach, a sunset dinner, and him getting down on one knee. I mean, it was like something out of a movie. I said yes, without a second thought. Our wedding was something else, beautiful, heartfelt, but it flew by in a blur. We started our married life in the house I inherited from my grandpa. It's a quaint, old place with a lot of character, and I've always loved it. A few weeks after settling in, Mark brought up a life-changing idea. "Babe, have you ever thought about taking a break from work? You know, being a housewife for a while?" Mark suggested one evening, his eyes full of hope. I remember feeling a jolt of surprise. "A housewife? But Mark, I've always been passionate about my career," I replied, trying to keep the confusion out of my voice. "I get that, Jane. But I've been doing really well at work. We can afford it, and think about it, no more stress, just focusing on us, maybe even starting a family soon," he said, reaching for my hand. His words, his tone, it was all so convincing. I couldn't help but get swayed by his enthusiasm. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. Why not shake things up a bit, right? The first few weeks were a novelty. I had time to do things I'd never had time for: gardening, reading, trying out new recipes. Mark would come home to a clean house and dinner on the table. We'd spend our evenings talking about our future, making plans, laughing. It was like a prolonged honeymoon phase. But as time passed, I started feeling a bit restless. I missed the challenges of my job, the satisfaction of solving complex problems. I even missed the annoying buzz of my office phone. Still, I pushed those feelings aside, telling myself that this was just an adjustment period. Then, things started changing subtly. Mark's compliments about how nice the house looked or how good dinner tasted became expectations. If dinner was late or the house a bit untidy, he'd make these offhand comments that stung more than I wanted to admit. I started feeling less like a partner and more like a live-in maid. I remember calling my best friend, Laura, to vent. "I just feel like I'm losing a bit of myself, you know?" I confided in her. "Losing yourself? Jane, you're a firecracker. Don't let this housewife gig douse your spark," Laura said, her voice a mixture of concern and encouragement. She had a point. I had always prided myself on being independent, on making my own way. And here I was, feeling lost in a role I never thought I'd play. After settling into this housewife role, I thought I had things figured out. But, boy, was I wrong. One evening, Mark dropped a surprise that turned everything upside down. Mark came home looking all serious, which was unusual for him. "Jane, we need to talk," he started, not even taking off his coat. "What's up? You look like you've seen a ghost," I joked, trying to lighten the mood. "It's my folks. Their apartment is getting renovated and they need a place to crash. Just for a couple of weeks," Mark said, avoiding my eyes. I was taken aback. "A couple of weeks? Here?" "Yeah, I mean, it's just for a short while." "It won't be that bad," he said, finally looking at me. I sighed, feeling a mix of reluctance and duty. "Okay, for a couple of weeks. But they need to respect our space, Mark." He nodded. "Of course, they will. Thanks, babe. You're the best." Fast forward a few days, and Mark's parents, Bob and Linda, arrived. And let me tell you, It was like a circus unloading. Bags, boxes, even furniture, they brought everything but the kitchen sink. "Jane, dear, make room. We've got a lot of stuff," Linda said, pushing past me with a box that looked like it contained her entire life. Bob followed, lugging a monstrous armchair. "Hope you don't mind us bringing some comforts from home," he grunted as he squeezed it through the door. Our cozy home turned into a storage unit overnight. Everywhere I looked, there were their things. It was overwhelming, to say the least. But that was just the start. Bob and Linda didn't waste time making themselves at home. Bob took over the TV, flipping channels like he owned the place. Linda started rearranging my kitchen. "My kitchen? Linda, what are you doing?" I asked, trying to keep my cool. "Oh, just organizing things a bit better, dear. You know how it is," she said without even looking at me. I bit my tongue, reminding myself it was only for a short time. But inside, I was fuming. This was my home, and they were treating it like their vacation house. Then came the dinner fiasco. I made a healthy salad and grilled chicken, my usual fare. But Linda looked at her plate like I'd served her grass. "What's this? Rabbit food?" Linda scoffed, pushing the plate away. "Mom, come on, Jane worked hard on this," Mark tried to intervene. "It's fine, Mark. I can make something else," I said, even though it was far from fine. No, let's order pizza." "I need some real food," Bob chimed in, already picking up his phone. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being an outsider in my own home. Mark snored beside me, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I was hosting, cooking, cleaning, and for what? To be treated like an unpaid maid in my own house. My in-laws, Bob and Linda, had turned my house into their own personal playground. But things went from bad to worse real quick. Linda started taking over the kitchen like she was running a military operation. One morning, as I was making my usual avocado toast, she marched in and made a face. "What are you eating?" "Bird food," she snorted, rummaging through the fridge. "It's avocado toast, Linda. It's healthy," I replied, trying to keep my cool. "Healthy, schmelthy. You need some real food, girl. Here, let me make you some eggs and bacon," she said, pushing me aside. I stood there, fuming, as she took over my breakfast. It was clear she didn't respect my choices or my space. Then there was Bob. He had turned our living room into his personal lounge. One evening, I wanted to watch my favorite show, but Bob was sprawled on the couch, watching some loud action movie. "Bob, do you mind if I watch my show?" "It's the season finale tonight," I asked, holding the remote hesitantly. "No can do, Jane. I'm watching this." "Find something else to do," he said without even glancing my way. I couldn't believe it. In my own living room. I stormed off, feeling like a stranger in my house. But the real kicker came a few days later. I found Linda rearranging my closet. "My closet? What the heck, Linda? That's my personal stuff," I yelled, losing my temper for the first time. "Oh, relax, Jane. I'm just making some space for our things. You've got too much junk here anyway," she said, tossing my clothes aside. That's when Mark walked in. "What's all the yelling about?" he asked, looking from me to his mom. "Your mother is going through my things." "That's what's wrong," I snapped. "Mom, maybe you should ask Jane before moving her stuff," Mark said, but his tone was half-hearted. Fine. I was just trying to help," Linda huffed, leaving the room in a mock huff. Mark turned to me. "Jane, can't you just let it go? They're just trying to fit in." "Just trying to fit in? They're taking over, Mark. This is our home, not theirs," I said, my voice rising. Mark sighed. "Just bear with it a bit longer, okay?" I felt so alone in that moment. My home didn't feel like mine anymore, and it seemed like Mark was more on their side than mine. So, the situation in my house was already pretty tense, but what happened next really pushed me over the edge. One day, I noticed my bank card was missing. Panic mode kicked in. I tore the house apart looking for it, only to find it in the most unexpected place, Linda's purse. I confronted her immediately. "Linda, why do you have my bank card?" She just shrugged. "Oh, I needed to pick up a few things and didn't have cash on me. I didn't think it would be a big deal." "A big deal? You took my card without asking." "That's stealing." I was fuming. Before I could say another word, Mark walked in. "What's all this shouting about?" he asked, looking from me to his mother. "Your mom took my bank card and used it without my permission," I explained, holding up the card. He turned to Linda. "Mom, you should have asked first." Linda rolled her eyes. "I just needed a few groceries. It's not like I bought a diamond necklace." I couldn't believe my ears. "It's my money, Linda. You can't just take my things." That's when Mark dropped a bombshell. "Jane, let's not blow this out of proportion. You live off my money anyway, so what's the big deal if my mom uses it?" I was speechless. His words hit me like a slap in the face. "Your money? I can't believe you're saying this." "It's our money, Mark, in our marriage." He just shrugged. "Whatever. It's not a big deal. She'll pay you back." I felt like I was in some bad dream. My husband was taking his mother's side over something so blatantly wrong. A couple of weeks passed, and the tension in the house was unbearable. I decided it was time to ask the big question. "So, when are you two planning to move back to your apartment?" I asked Bob and Linda one evening at dinner. They just laughed. "Move back? Why would we do that?" Linda said, exchanging a look with Mark. "Yeah, we've decided to stay here. It's much nicer, and Mark doesn't want to waste money on rent for us," Bob added. I turned to Mark, looking for some sort of explanation. He avoided my eyes. "Yeah, Jane. It doesn't make sense to rent a place for them when we have space here." I sat there, stunned. My home, my sanctuary, was being overtaken. My husband, whom I thought was my partner, was now telling me his parents were here to stay. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, they did. One day, I decided to go for a jog, just to clear my head. But luck wasn't on my side. I tripped and fell, and the pain was instant. I knew I'd broken my leg. Hobbling back home was a nightmare. When I got back, I found Mark and his parents in the living room. "Mark, I think I broke my leg. I need to go to the hospital," I said, trying to keep the pain out of my voice. Mark looked up, annoyed. "What now, Jane? Can't you see we're busy here?" Linda chimed in. "Oh, stop being dramatic. It's probably just a sprain." "No, it really hurts." "I need help," I insisted, feeling the room spin from the pain. Bob just scoffed. "At your age, you shouldn't be running around like a teenager." "Serve you right." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I'm in pain here. Can't any of you see that?" Mark finally got up, his expression more of inconvenience than concern. "Fine, I'll take you. But this better not be some ploy to get out of housework." At the hospital, it was confirmed, a broken leg. The next few weeks were hell. I was stuck at home, on crutches, unable to do much. You'd think my husband and his parents would help, right? Wrong. They acted as if nothing had changed. I was still expected to cook and clean. One day, I was trying to make lunch, balancing on my crutches. Linda walked in and saw me struggling. "Can't you do that any faster?" "We're hungry," she said, not offering to help. "I'm doing the best I can on one leg," I snapped, my frustration boiling over. "Well, it's not good enough. You're being incredibly lazy," Linda retorted. That's when Mark walked in. "What's going on here?" he asked, looking from me to his mother. "Your wife is taking forever to make lunch. It's like she's using her injury as an excuse," Linda complained. Mark sighed. "Jane, can't you just try a bit harder? We're all hungry here." I was in disbelief. "Try harder? I'm on crutches, Mark. What do you expect me to do?" He just shrugged and left the kitchen with his mom, leaving me there, seething and in pain. You won't believe what happened next in my in-law nightmare. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, it did. A few weeks after my injury, Linda and Bob announced they were hosting Thanksgiving at our house and inviting their relatives over. The news hit me like a ton of bricks. "Thanksgiving? Here?" I asked, incredulous. "How am I supposed to manage that with my leg like this?" Linda just waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, you won't have to do much. Just stay out of the way and let us handle it." I was fuming. "This is my house, Linda. You can't just invite people over without asking me." That's when Mark stepped in. "Jane, it's just a family gathering. Let's not make a big deal out of it." "A big deal? Mark, I can barely walk, and now your parents are taking over our house for a party?" I said, my voice rising. Bob chimed in, "We thought it would be nice to have a family gathering here. After all, we're all living under the same roof now." And then Linda dropped another bombshell. "Actually, Jane, we were thinking it might be best if you stayed somewhere else for a couple of weeks. With your leg and all, you'll just be in the way." I stared at her, completely dumbfounded. "Stay somewhere else? In my own house?" "Yes, dear. Just for a couple of weeks. It's for the best," Linda continued, as if she was doing me a favor. I felt my blood boiling. "You want me to leave my house so you can play host? That's insane." Mark chimed in, trying to sound reasonable. "Jane, it's just for a short while. It'll be easier for everyone." "Easier for everyone? This is my home, Mark. I'm not going anywhere." I shot back, my voice shaking with anger. Bob shrugged. "We thought you'd appreciate not having to deal with the stress of the holiday." That was it. I lost it. "Get out. Both of you, get out of my house now," I yelled, feeling a mix of rage and disbelief. Mark's face turned red. "Jane, you're being unreasonable. They're my parents. You can't just kick them out." "Unreasonable? They're taking over my home, and you're letting them." I was practically screaming now. Mark's expression hardened. "If you can't respect my parents, maybe we shouldn't be together. Is that what you want? A divorce?" I glared at him, feeling a rush of adrenaline. Without a word, I went to my desk drawer and pulled out a set of papers I had prepared, just in case things went south. "What's this?" Mark asked, his voice faltering as he took the papers from my hand. "Divorce papers. I've had them ready for a while now," I said, my voice steady. Mark looked at me, then at the papers, and back at me. "You're serious? You'd really go through with this?" "Yes, I am. I won't be bullied in my own house." "Not by you, not by anyone," I said, feeling a strange sense of empowerment amidst the chaos. Linda and Bob just stood there, speechless. Mark looked like he had been punched in the gut. The room was thick with tension. "Make your choice, Mark. Your parents or our marriage," I said, holding my ground. Mark laughed, a cold, hard sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Fine," he said, and to my shock, he signed the papers right there and then. "You'll regret this, Jane. You can't even support yourself without me." I watched him, feeling a mix of relief and disbelief. "I'll manage," I said, though my voice was barely a whisper. He shrugged. "Your loss." Then he and his parents gathered their things and left. Just like that, my marriage was over. The moment the door closed behind them, I felt a strange sense of peace. I was alone, yes, but it was a better alternative to the constant tension and disrespect. The first thing I did was change the locks. It felt like I was securing my own personal fortress. Thanksgiving came around faster than I expected. I was still adjusting to my new reality, finding comfort in the quiet of my own company. Then, unexpectedly, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Mark, his parents, and a bunch of their relatives standing there, ready to celebrate. "What are you doing here?" I asked, stunned. "We're here for Thanksgiving, Jane." "Did you think we were serious about not coming?" Mark said with a smug look. I couldn't believe the audacity. "You're not welcome here anymore, Mark. This is my house, and you're not my family, not after what you did." Linda piped up, "Oh, come on, Jane. Don't be so petty. Let's just have a nice dinner." I stood my ground. "No, you need to leave, now." Mark laughed. "You can't kick us out. This was our family home." "Not anymore. I've changed the locks, Mark. You gave up any right to this house when you signed those papers," I said, feeling a surge of empowerment. There was a moment of silence, then Mark's face turned red with anger. "Fine. Have it your way," he said, and they all turned and left. After the Thanksgiving showdown, I started to rebuild my life, and let me tell you, it wasn't easy, but it was mine. A few weeks after Mark and his family left for good, I was sitting in my quiet, peaceful living room when my best friend, Laura, dropped by. "Hey, Jane. How are you holding up?" Laura asked as she walked in, her eyes scanning the room. "Better than I expected, actually," I replied, offering her a smile. Laura sat down, looking at me closely. "You seem different, stronger, somehow." I chuckled. "Yeah, I guess getting rid of dead weight does that to you." We both laughed, and in that moment, I felt lighter than I had in months. "But seriously, what's next for you, Jane?" Laura asked, her tone shifting to something more serious. I took a deep breath. "I'm going back to work. I've already started looking for accounting jobs. I'm not going to lie, it's a bit scary, but it's time to get back on my feet." Laura nodded. "That's the spirit. You were always the smartest one at the office. They'd be lucky to have you back." Her words meant a lot, and they gave me the boost I needed. I was ready to face the world again, on my own terms. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of job interviews and getting my life back on track. I landed a great position at a local firm, and for the first time in a long while, I was excited about the future. My home was mine again, my life was mine again. I had faced the worst and come out stronger.